small town and hanging out with some rough guys taught me a thing or two about standing up for myself. I learned to hit hard, hit fast, and hit first when I could. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. This time, it didn't go well. The guy I faced had skills I didn't understand. He moved around lightly, kicking and punching with ease. I later found out he was a second-degree black belt. He seemed fine until he got angry or started drinking. That night, he was both. He was rude to his girlfriend and everyone else around. I couldn't stay quiet when he slapped her. I called him out and dared him to go up against a man. I learned my lesson. I tried my best and even landed a few hits, but in the end, he really hurt me. It took 3 bouncers to pull him off, and they had to use sticks to get him away. He even ended up injuring one of the bouncers. When the judge learned he was a black belt and threw the first punch, he gave him a harsh sentence. He had to spend 6 months in jail and go to anger management therapy afterward. The judge warned him that if he got into any more trouble, he'd face the maximum penalty. Even though the bouncer was the one who got hurt and the club pressed charges, he blamed everything on me. He found a way to let me know that when he got out, he planned to come after me. I knew that 6 months of training wouldn't be enough for a black belt, but it might help me not get hurt again. That and the small gun I carried for protection. Our sensei was a 10th degree black belt, so I trusted he knew what he was doing. He was a tall, strong man in his early 40s. Our class had people of all ages, from 16 to 62, and in different levels of fitness. I was 22. I stretched and worked hard, and my muscles were sore for a long time. I avoided more trouble when the guy I fought lashed out at 5 prisoners and a guard. This got him another 3 years in jail. In a moment of self-discovery, I realized I loved training. I earned my green belt in 6 months by going to class 4 times a week. We learned from assistants while the master taught us lessons and showed us techniques. He had one guiding principle he repeated often. Fight with your mind. Think, plan, don't just react. Be flexible if you need to adapt. We partnered up to practice moves. For some reason, a woman who was just over 5 feet tall and weighed less than 100 pounds always chose me to practice with. I once asked her why she picked me every time. Because you're basically the same size as my husband, except you don't have a beer belly. When I get good enough, I'm going to stand up to him. It seemed he had a history of being harsh, and she told him she was going to an exercise class instead of karate. She finally felt brave enough to face him. On that Saturday night, after he had a few beers, he tried to hit her. She defended herself so well that he ran to the bathroom to hide. It was an old mobile home, and she took the phone, stepped into the hallway, and called all their friends and family. She told them that he had locked himself in the bathroom to avoid her. He was shouting threats about what he would do when she went to sleep. Her last call was to emergency services, and she held the phone up so they could hear his angry words more clearly. The deputies arrived and gave him a place to stay for 2 days, taking away all the weapons in the house. He never got his hunting rifle and shotguns back. She used that time to clear out the house and their bank accounts, moving back in with her mother. She never returned to class. There was a young girl at class, tall and athletic. She seemed to like me, but I was 22 and white, and she had just turned 17. I didn't want to get involved with someone younger, no matter her background. Still, she sometimes flirted, and I would play along a little. We practiced how to escape if someone grabbed our neck, shirt, or collar. The instructor gave us a talk before we started. One of the best ways to get away is to use surprise. Scream or do something unexpected. It can slow down their reaction time. Sometimes just a moment can mean the difference between serious harm or escape. Now let's begin. She went through the usual moves, and I followed the methods we learned while the instructors watched. When it was my turn to play the attacker, I reached for her collar. Being tall at 5'10", she jumped up, and I ended up grabbing her by mistake. I quickly pulled my hands back, and she took advantage of my moment of surprise, knocking me down with a quick punch to the nose. I was already slightly off balance, and I fell hard. She leaned over with a smile. Surprise! Those who saw laughed, and soon everyone found out, so they had to stop practice. The instructor, always eager to teach a lesson, made a point. Even though what she did wasn't really right for class, it shows my point. The unexpected can leave an opponent vulnerable. That's all for tonight. By that time, many of the younger students had become friends, and we often went to a fast food place for a snack. Chandra and her sister never joined us. I once asked a friend why. They don't have money. Neither of them works, and they're still in school. They live with their grandmother, who is on a limited income. They pay for their lessons by cleaning the dojo. I was a little late leaving that evening. The others had already gone, and as I walked, I saw them on the sidewalk. I stopped to talk. "Hey, girls, do you want to grab something with the others? I'll pay, just to be seen with you." There was a guy with them who seemed interested in her sister. I wasn't sure if he thought I wanted to take them away or if he just didn't like me. "Move along. Leave the sisters alone," he said. I smiled back. "I was going to order fried chicken and watermelon. Guess I'll have a burger instead." I got out of my Jeep. Chandra laughed, and the guy looked surprised. I was wearing a Rolling Stones shirt, my uniform pants, and sneakers, so I looked ready for fun. Her sister put her hand on his arm. "Don't! He didn't mean anything by it, and he could probably handle himself." Then she turned to me. "Thanks for the offer, but Chandra and I need to get home. Maybe next time." She looked around. Chandra was already in the Jeep, fastening her seatbelt and waving. "Tell Grams I'll be home soon," she called out. I turned to her older sister. "Okay, just make sure she's home by 9:30. My Jeep was stripped down, no top, no doors. It made her a little nervous at first, but when the wind hit, she loved it. "Are you going down Main Street?" she asked, looking uneasy. "Yeah, it's the quickest way. Why? Are you embarrassed to be seen with me?" I joked. She looked down, shy. "No, I thought you might not want to be seen with me." That bothered me a little. "If you're my friend, it doesn't matter to me what color you are. Besides, it's just a burger. We're not running away together." She was quiet for the rest of the drive. We could see our friends through the windows. Chandra waved as we parked. "What can I order?" she asked before we went in. "It's McDonald's. Order whatever you like," I replied. She gave me a strange look. I realized my last girlfriend had been British, and I picked up some of her expressions. I handed her a 20, told her what I wanted, and went to the restroom. I came back just as she paid. I grabbed the tray and joined our friends. "Hi, everyone. Look who I brought. Sandra Killer Smile Smith. Watch out for her." She blushed but quickly responded. "Never underestimate the power of a surprise. Does your nose still hurt?" I rubbed my nose. It was still a little sore. "Don't worry, one day it'll be my chance to surprise you," I said with a laugh. We joked around like good friends for about 45 minutes before everyone started to leave for the night. "Ready to go?" I asked. "Nope. I can stay out until 9:30 and it's only 8:15. Take me for a ride, but first I still have your change. I want a chocolate shake." She got a large shake, gave me the remaining change, and hopped in. "Where to?" I asked. "I've never been four-wheeling. Is there a nearby place we can go?" She was in luck. A friend had some land about 50 acres just outside of town, and I had permission to ride the logging trails there. It had rained 2 days earlier, so there were plenty of mud puddles. I startled her at first, but she soon relaxed. She laughed, yelled, and told me to go faster. I got a little too daring, hit a puddle too quickly, and splashed muddy water on us both. I pulled over to a clear area and stopped. I had taken the back seat out for camping trips, using the space for storage. I always carried a box filled with essentials like towels, dry shirts, and even shorts. Since my shorts wouldn't fit her, I handed her a shirt and 2 towels. It was warm outside, but wet shirts would be uncomfortable on the way home. "Here, go behind those bushes to dry off. Put this shirt on or you'll be cold on the way back. No one can see you out here." It was getting dark, so I gave her a flashlight. Once she was behind the bushes, I took off my pants and shirt. Just as I reached for my shorts, she suddenly screamed and rushed out from behind the bushes, jumping into the Jeep and shouting, "Snake! Snake!" She stopped screaming and stared at me. I quickly slipped on my shorts and handed her the shirt. I waited for her to get dressed before I went to collect our clothes from behind the bushes. She put on her pants while I turned away. Any snake that might have been nearby surely left after all the commotion. I climbed back into the Jeep and we sat in silence for a moment. I looked at her seriously. "We can't talk about this." She burst into laughter, still giggling when we hit the highway. Just before we merged onto the road, she grabbed my face and gave me a quick kiss that felt bold. She let go and laughed. "I always wanted to kiss someone like you. By the way, nice build, especially for a guy like you." If she thought I would be embarrassed, she was mistaken. "Thanks, and I have to say, you look amazing no matter what." Her smile revealed her bright teeth. She held my hand all the way back to town, only letting go when I needed to change gears. I kept repeating to myself, 17, 17, 17, trying to focus on something else. We arrived at her apartment, which was in a government housing area. The sound of my engine announced our arrival. I'll go inside and change before my grandma sees me. I'll bring your shirt back next week. I got out of the Jeep. Look around. There are about 15 of your neighbors sitting on their porches. How long do you think it will take them to tell her that a boy in a loud Jeep brought you home? Or that you weren't in your uniform? No, you're going to take me in and introduce me, and I'll explain what happened. You could see she really didn't want to, but I pushed her to do it. Her grandma was tall, just like her daughters. She wasn't too heavy or too thin, just an average 60-year-old woman. When I offered my hand, she shook it and listened closely while I told my story. When I finished, she leaned forward and looked into my eyes. I really believe you. That tale is too wild to be made up. Would you like some coffee and peach pie? So we sat at the kitchen table for a snack. From the pie, I could tell she was a great cook. Chandra sat with us but didn't say much. After my second piece, I leaned back in my chair. I appreciate your kindness, but I need to leave. I have work tomorrow, you know. It was nice to meet you, ma'am. She smiled. I like a young man with good manners and an appetite. Good night. Chandra, please walk our guest out, and you better be back in 10 minutes. You have school in the morning. She wrapped up a slice of pie for me to take home. Chandra switched off the porch light and took my hand. You're the first guy I've seen my grandma like. That must mean something. Before I could say anything, she kissed me quickly and stood back, giggling. I'm keeping your shirt as a memory of this adventure. I'll see you at the dojo. She practically skipped back inside. I thought on the way home to be cautious with this one. She's young and different, but her kiss was confident, and it was sweet. Chandra became my main practice partner. Without fail, she was in the Jeep waiting for me afterward. Her sister Gail would join us about every other time, and we became friends. One day Chandra was sick, so Gail came with me alone. We had something to eat, then she asked if I could take her somewhere to talk. I lived only 10 minutes away, so I asked if my house would work. She surprised me by saying yes. She admired my little 2-bedroom cottage that needed a lot of work. A friend had inherited it from his grandfather but couldn't pay the estate taxes. I offered to buy it for half the tax value, and he quickly agreed. At 20, I became a homeowner. I worked construction jobs as a teenager and learned a lot, so I spent every extra dollar I had making improvements. For things I couldn't do myself, I traded work or paid when I had to. After almost 2 years, I was about 75% done. I was really proud of my home. Gail couldn't believe someone as young as me could own a house and admired how well I kept it. It's actually easier to be neat than to be messy. I've always been a bit of a neat freak. I poured 2 glasses of tea and we sat at the kitchen table. She seemed nervous. Just say it, Gail, before it gets stuck in your throat. Okay, you need to be careful around Chandra. She told me yesterday that she thinks she's in love with you. She has a plan, and I've seen one of her notebooks where she has been practicing writing Chandra Turner all over it. I couldn't believe it. Are you sure? I've never given her a reason to think that. All I've done is buy her a few Big Macs and take her for a ride twice. We've never been on a date. Plus, I'm 22 and she's 17. That really concerns me. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but my friends and family might not accept her. Besides you and your grandmother, I can't see myself being close to her family or friends. She smiled sadly. I'm not offended, Bobby. It is what it is, and you've always been kind to us. Just be careful and try not to hurt her. She and we haven't had many good things happen in our lives. And about the age difference, you might not realize how much attention you get around here. She may be 17, but she's more mature than her age. You can take me home now. Thanks for the tea and for listening. To my surprise, she gave me a big hug and a peck on the cheek and stepped back grinning. Wow, Bobby, maybe I should have tried to set you up. I'm not a child. I could show you things that would surprise you. But if you're not taking me to your place, let's get going to your Jeep. She kept her tone light, but her eyes looked serious, so we hurried out the door with her laughter behind us. I disappointed Chandra a few times by not going out with friends. It all came to a head when I found her waiting in my Jeep, looking determined. I'm not getting out, Bobby. Wherever you're going, I'm going too, even if it's just home. I was kind of glad. I wanted her company. I just nodded and we joined the group for a meal. They welcomed her back, joking about how happy they were we had resolved our issues. She just smiled and I found myself blushing a few times. She hurried us out. I thought she needed to get home, but as I started to pull away, she said, "Turn left." To get to her apartment, I usually turned right. I had the top and doors on my Jeep because it was supposed to rain. She wanted to go off-road, so I took her on the logging trails. We reached the highest point of the property and I had to turn around. She asked if we could take a moment to sit, so I turned off the engine. We sat quietly as the sun began to set. She took my hand. "What are we doing here, Bobby?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't know. You wanted to go four-wheeling." "Stop! That's not what I meant, and you know it. I like you. You like me, I think, but you won't do anything about it. It's because I'm black, isn't it?" I thought about it for a moment, but decided to be honest. Yes and no. This isn't a big city with broad views. This is a small town with its share of people who aren't very accepting, but that's not the only reason. I'm 22, you're 17. I've been out in the real world for a while, and you're still in high school. Plus, you're not of age, so if we got closer, I could really get into trouble if things went wrong. I do find you attractive, but I don't see a future for us. I thought that would end the conversation, but she was smiling. You find me attractive? I can work with that. The rest can wait. So no romance for 8 more months. To be fair, I've known guys who weren't so great, so I know what I'm missing. But you're worth the wait to me. It's not illegal to kiss, is it? Just no romance. I should have stopped her. Looking back, that might have avoided a lot of trouble. But we were both young, and I guess the difference between us added to the thrill. One thing I learned, when you're caught up in the moment, it doesn't matter who you are with. It all feels the same. So we sat in the Jeep in the woods trying to kiss each other. After a bit, she moved closer to me. While enjoying the moment, I suddenly felt a warning in my mind. She's too young, echoed in my head. I pulled away, gasping as if I had just run a long race. She leaned back and laughed. You could give in, you know. I won't tell anyone. No one will ever find out. I might have been young, but I wasn't foolish. She was a teenager, and a secret this big wouldn't last. She would tell her friends who would tell more friends, and soon everyone would know. Not gonna happen. Buckle up. I'm taking you home. She laughed again, teasing me as she left the car. All right, but you might break a record for waiting too long. For the next couple of months, I still took her and Gail out with our friends. She always wanted to sit away from everyone else, but I insisted we stay with the group, avoiding any moments alone with her. Then one day, she caught me off guard. I was home watching a game show when she appeared at my door. How did you get here? I asked, as she walked right in. Got Joe, one of our karate buddies, to drop me off. Did you get anything to drink? Without waiting for a reply, she headed to the kitchen, grabbed a soda and some chips, and plopped down on the couch. What are we watching? I should have taken her home right then. I should have sat in my chair. I should have put a stop to it then. But I let her stay. I sat next to her on the couch and we talked. She made an effort to keep the conversation light. For someone her age, she seemed to know a lot about charm. The only time she let her guard down was when I showed her around my house. She looked at my bedroom and frowned. You need a bigger bed. She didn't push it, but she made her point. Just say the word, and it could change. The way she moved and acted was clear. Before I took her home, we got caught up in a moment. I hardly noticed until she had removed her top layer of clothes and was pressing against me while I held her close. I glanced down and saw the contrast of our skin, and it stirred something in me. Chandra had a beautiful warm tone, smooth skin. I felt her hand moving closer, and suddenly I was jolted back to reality. Chandra, stop! She just smiled, not even bothering to fix her shirt. What's wrong? Don't you like this? You know I do, but this isn't right. Please put your shirt back on. I'm taking you home. Her expression was wise beyond her years. We're having some trouble with the water heater. Mind if I take a quick shower first? She stood up and stretched before removing her shirt. She bent down to take off her jeans, and I turned away, feeling overwhelmed. I could hear her singing in the shower when I finally regained my composure. Feeling unsure, I left the house. I went to the store and bought some drinks, but I hardly touched them. By the time I returned, she was already dressed and had her hair in a ponytail. She spotted the drinks and grinned. Ooh, are we having a party? I wasn't sure how to respond. I realized I needed to set some boundaries. No, after I take you home, I'm going to think about everything that happened. You shouldn't tease people like that. It's not safe. She looked playful. The only problem is that you can't take advantage of someone who is willing. That's what you have here. I'm confident, no matter what you think of my age. She was getting under my skin. No, what you are is a teenager acting as if there are no rules. You're lively and full of energy, but you're still young. You're trying to give away something that should be earned. If you don't appreciate it, no one else will either. You want to share without thinking about the consequences. That's a risky choice. She was taken aback, and soon tears began to fall, which only made me more frustrated. I gently took her chin to lift her face to mine. Do you understand what I'm saying? You want something but feel sad because you can't have it. If you want to be with me, you need to grow up and act like it. We haven't even gone out together, yet here you are wanting to move forward. Do you understand any of this? She hurried to the bathroom and shut the door. I waited on the couch and had a couple of drinks before she returned. Her tears had stopped. Please take me home now, she said flatly. To her surprise, instead of the Jeep, I opened my garage and pulled out my classic 1968 Mustang convertible, which I cherished. The look on her face when she saw it was unforgettable. I think you learned something today, I said as I opened the door for her. This is a ride a woman should enjoy. She was quiet nearly the entire drive to her apartment. Thank you. Believe it or not, I agree with some of what you said. Now, when and where are we going on our date? That's the first step to a grown-up relationship, right? She noticed my surprised expression and frowned. Oh, I see. You talk down to me, mess around a bit, but when it comes to being seen together, you won't do it. I understand. She had thrown down the gauntlet and I couldn't back down. Chandra, it's not respectful for a young woman to speak that way. If you act like that when we go out, then there's no date. You're free next Saturday, right? Her emotions changed quickly, showing anger, doubt, hope, and finally, happiness. I can't confirm until I check my schedule, but I think I'm free. I'll find out, but I'll make a note of it. Well, I hope you are free. If not, please let me know soon so I can ask someone else, and I can also speak to your grandmother first. That comment sparked her temper. Her hand moved quickly and the sound of the slap echoed in the small car. You jerk! Just so you know, starting now, there are no other girls in your life. I won't stand for it. I was taken aback. Again, not the best way for a young lady to behave, but I get it. Just know, what goes around comes around. I have family at your school. If I hear about any high school drama, it's over. Now, apologize. She sat with her arms crossed, looking stubborn until we reached her driveway. I'm sorry. I guess I need to grow up a bit more. Elle gave her hand a squeeze. Apology accepted. Now let's go talk to your Gram. Do we have to? Yes, we do. She's your guardian. You want to start off on the right foot, don't you? Her grandmother was quiet for a moment. Finally, she sighed and took Chandra's hand. Are you sure about this? It will be tough, maybe harder than you think. You may open yourselves up to a lot of trouble. And you, Bobby, are you sure too? She still has 4 months until she turns 18. I know you want this, but it could lead to many issues. Chandra looked into my eyes and made up her mind. Okay. If you both really want this, go ahead. Bobby, she needs to be home no later than midnight on weekends and 10 on school nights, unless she has work to do. I expect you to take care of her. Don't let me down. Agreed? Yes, ma'am. You can count on me. She patted my hand. I trust you. Now, Chandra, I need you to behave. I know you can be strong-willed. Give me your word. Chandra hugged her. I will. Thank you. I promise I'll behave. Well, there I was, stepping into unknown territory. I didn't know the right paths or where the challenges would be. One wrong move could lead to trouble. I thought I had seen all the surprises for the day until I went to bed. There, on my pillow, was a note. Just a little something to lift your spirits since I know I caused some stress. For 2 months, life was pretty good. I would see Chandra about once during the week, not counting karate lessons, and we usually spent our weekends together. I started helping her with her homework since she was struggling a bit in English and science, both of which I was good at. I worked with her until she tried to get me to do her work for her, so I stopped. I also made it clear that I wasn't looking to include anyone without a diploma in my plans for the future. She began to study harder. I made a choice that came back to cause me some trouble. When she did well on a test, I would do something nice for her or buy her a little gift. Since she was on a tight budget, she didn't often get new clothes. If she received an A on a test, I would get her a cute top. A higher average meant new jeans or sneakers. My niece wasn't a fan of our relationship, but she kept an eye on Chandra. She mentioned that Chandra was becoming a bit too proud about her new clothes and our relationship, claiming she could get me to buy anything she desired. Chandra even talked about how she wanted to decorate my house and what kind of car I should get her. This behavior managed to distance her from almost everyone around her. She proudly claimed that if I resisted her, all she had to do was tempt me, and I would give in. One of the football players she had dated before me started reaching out to her, telling her how much he missed her. He talked about how he was going to be a big deal at college because of his football scholarship and how much money he would make when he went pro. She began to listen, especially when money became a topic of conversation. It was Christmas break, schools were closed, and many factories were shut for the holidays. I had to work on Thursday and Friday as a supervisor for a repair team. It was important to me because it meant a possible promotion. Chandra was not pleased about it. "When are we going to have fun?" she asked. "Later. This is important for me. It could lead to more money. I will finish by 8, and we'll have time after." But then a problem arose, and I didn't get off work until 10. I called her, and she was upset. She told me to go home since it was so late. Still, I went over right away. I was surprised to find she wasn't home. "Sorry, Bobby, she went out with Gail to shop. They should be back soon according to her note," said her grandmother. As soon as those words were spoken, Gail walked in. "Where's Chandra?" she asked. "I have no idea. I haven't seen her since this morning. Why do you ask?" her grandmother answered. Gail looked at the note. "Oh no, I bet she went to a party." I felt my face get warm. "What party?" Realizing she had let something slip, she quickly changed her words. "Forget I said that. She might have gone out to find your gift. Why not come back tomorrow for breakfast with us?" "Listen, I appreciate you defending your sister, but you shared too much. If I don't find out where this party is within a minute, I will start making calls when I get home. I know many kids who go to her school. I will find out where it is, and I'll go there to see for myself." I waited, but she didn't say anything. "Good night. I think I'll skip breakfast tomorrow." Her grandmother stopped me. "Wait, Bobby. Gail, if you know anything, please tell him." "Okay, Marcus has been trying to get her to go to this party the football team is having for a week now. She really wanted to go but knew you wouldn't agree. I bet that's where she is." I sighed in understanding. No wonder she told me to head home when I called to say I would be late. Where is this party? "Don't go," Gail warned. "It's only for certain people. You wouldn't be allowed in. Maybe I could work my charm. Where is it?" Gail sighed again. "I'll go with you. Maybe I can help get you in. Just promise me you won't do anything reckless." I smiled my best smile. "I promise." It was at an old farmhouse in a remote area. There were about 30 cars in the yard and loud music played that you could hear through the door. "Hold on to me and remember your promise." A big man stood at the door. He was definitely not a high school kid. Gail had to shout to be heard. The guy looked at me and shook his head. I leaned closer to him as if I wanted to say something, and then I pushed him back into an old chair. After that, I turned to Gail. Gail couldn't see what I was doing and looked confused as I yelled to her, "He said we could go right in." I took her hand and we walked inside. The smell of smoke filled the air. There was a keg and some bottles in the corner. Everyone seemed to be inebriated and we couldn't find Chandra anywhere. I started checking doors. In every room there were pairs sitting very close together. I started to think about all the rules being broken. Underage drinking and drugs were everywhere. If the party got shut down, many teens would have some explaining to do. After looking through the downstairs rooms, I ventured upstairs. Word spread that someone was causing trouble, and a few sober guests tried to stop me. I was almost at the top when one guy grabbed me. A quick move sent him tumbling down, knocking into others behind him. I found Chandra in the first room with Marcus. In moments like this, you notice small details. She was wearing the purple underwear she had left at my place months ago. That was it. Marcus was in the room with her, and they were very close together. I couldn't tell how much she had to drink, but I knew she recognized me and the situation she was in. "Bobby! No!" That was all she managed to say before I turned around and left. I had seen enough. Another guy tried to get in my way, but I pushed him aside. He fell and stayed where he landed. After that, everyone stepped back as I walked out. Gail had Chandra by the hand, wearing just her underwear and a shirt, while holding her shoes and pants. Marcus was right behind them. Gail quickly helped her into the back seat of the Jeep. Marcus stepped up in front of me, shouting loudly while his friend stayed on the front porch. He was trying to act tough, and he was really angry. He shouted so everyone could hear. "I was going to fight you, but she's not worth it. Get off my lawn." He was drunk enough to think he was intimidating. How would you know what that feels like? Most girls just use you for practice. Everyone knows you get upset when they tease you. I'm pretty sure they used you for a candy design. Do you get any money from that? They were laughing, and he got furious. It turned into a quick, chaotic scene, and soon he was on the ground, taking deep breaths. "Better get up. You're in my way, and I need to hurry. I have to bring Gail and her friend back before her grandmother starts to worry, so please move aside quickly." The weather had been unpredictable, with rain and light snow for days. I wasn't driving with the best grip, but my tires splashed a few cars on the way out. The last time I saw Marcus, he had to jump into a muddy ditch to avoid being hit. Gail was trying to speak, and Chandra was crying and screaming. It was giving me a headache. "No more talking until we get home. I mean it. Be quiet." Everything quieted down to small sniffles until I pulled into the driveway. I got out and opened the door. "Everyone out and into the house right now. Go." Chandra started to say something. "Not a word. Go inside and tell your grandmother how proud she can be of your behavior tonight. Here." I reached into the back and grabbed some wrapped gifts. "These are for Gail and your grandmother. A couple might be for you. Consider them farewell gifts." I placed them on her porch, and she followed me, looking lost. She had managed to put on her pants, but was still holding her shoes. "Come on inside before you catch a cold. We're done here. Don't call. I won't answer. Don't show up at my place. I won't let you in, and you'll have to walk home. Goodbye." I got back into the Jeep while Gail and her grandmother tried to help Chandra, who had fallen on the porch. I didn't look back. Of course, Chandra ignored my words and called until I stopped picking up. I went out and bought an answering machine so I could screen my calls. I took one call from Gail. "She's really upset." "I don't care." "Yes, you do, or you wouldn't sound so angry." I sighed. "You're right. I am angry and disappointed. I was actually starting to plan for the future. It's better I found out now than later. It's easier to break up than to separate for good." Then I heard a scream and a phone drop. She must have been listening on another line. I started hanging up. "Wait, Bobby, I didn't know she was on the line. Please, can you get past this?" I let my frustration show. "Yes. Let's go back in time and see if she makes the same choice. One of the last things a person wants to see is their partner being affectionate with someone else. She never really cared for me. It was more about her own ego. Tell her to leave me alone. I mean it. Send my best to your grandmother." I didn't go to karate for a week. I had things to do at home and didn't want to see Chandra. The following week I returned. I enjoyed it, and I wasn't going to let anyone spoil that for me. Or so I thought. Her eyes widened when I walked in and she approached me. I gently stepped back. "Stop right there. I'm not interested in being close to you, talking to you, or being around you. I'm here to learn. Find another practice partner. I walked past her as the tears began to fall. The atmosphere in the dojo felt heavy that day. Most of our friends knew we were close, and something had changed. When it was time to practice, I paired up with a new student, a woman in her 30s with blonde hair. I had never seen someone look so pale and then so flushed. If looks could hurt, the blonde and I would have been in trouble. She glared at the blonde as everyone was leaving, and the woman flinched. I quickly asked her what she said. She looked terrified. She said she'd hurt me if I got too close to you again. Things only got worse. I decided to stop going and started searching for a new dojo. A few weeks later, my old teacher came to visit. I didn't let him settle in before I asked what he wanted. He, of course, wanted me to return. "I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable there anymore. I appreciate what you taught me, but too much is happening. I can't focus on learning with all that going on." I had no idea at the time, but he was losing students. Other schools had opened in town, and there weren't many people interested in learning martial arts. Joe told me one day at the grocery store that several of the older students were leaving. My teacher was also going through a rough time. He was getting divorced and had been giving private lessons to a married student. From time to time, I would see Chandra on the street. I ran into Gail one day and we had lunch. She's really unhappy. Graham has been very strict with her, and she feels trapped. I knew from my niece that she was dating Marcus. I'm sure she's found someone to make her feel better. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I couldn't help but feel a little pleased. I saw Chandra and Marcus walking down the sidewalk, and when she spotted me in my car, she clung to him, whispering. Marcus looked up, puffed out his chest, and smiled, but his grin faded when my date walked out of the store. She was a tall blonde, attracting a lot of attention. I got out, opened her door, and gave her a quick kiss. I made sure they could hear us. Come on, sweetie. I want to spend some time with you before we sleep. She laughed and replied, You know, every time we try to cuddle, we end up getting carried away. We have all night. No need to rush. If you want more tomorrow, there's always the morning. I couldn't hide my big smile. I acted like I had just noticed them. Hello, Chandra, I said cheerfully. Lovely day, isn't it? I'd love to chat, but I can't keep my girlfriend waiting. See you. It made me feel good to see her upset while Marcus looked angry. My blonde date was just a short-term thing. Sure, she was fun to be with, but honestly, we didn't connect intellectually. At 22, you might enjoy being close to someone, but you can't spend all your time that way. If you're not able to talk, it can feel uncomfortable. She met a biker at a bar who wasn't interested in chatting either. They seemed perfect for each other. I didn't like that she was gone, but I was relieved she had left. I had been learning Japanese karate, which focused mainly on strikes. The new dojo I joined was based on Chinese kung fu, which emphasized grappling. It took some getting used to. I held a brown belt in my previous style, but now wore a plain white one. The teacher introduced me to the class and mentioned where I had trained before. He wanted me to spar with one of his instructors to show my skills and see what level I would be after learning the basic moves. The instructor he chose was quite rude, mocking me before we began. It was all part of a mind game to throw me off. Instead of responding to him, I smiled, which seemed to unnerve him. We moved around for a minute until he struck first, trying to push me back and then take me down. I saw it coming, stepped aside, and tapped him on the cheek to score points. The class laughed, which embarrassed him, and from that moment on, he came at me full force. He hit me in a way that knocked me off balance, but I quickly regained my footing. When he charged at me, I redirected him, sending him crashing into the wall. He got angrier and attacked me even more. I had a split lip and one eye was almost closed, but I could see he had taken some hits too. I waited for my chance. He tried to take me down several times, so I acted like I was opening myself up, and when he grabbed me, I caught his arms against my chest, holding him still. I hit him with quick punches that surprised him. After that, I turned and pulled him forward, giving a hard elbow to the back of his head, and he fell down. I stood there, breathing heavily, while everyone in the class watched in shock. The teacher looked unhappy. I bowed to him and said I was sorry. He stopped me and said I did what I needed to do. He said it wasn't meant to be a real fight and that I had shown my skills. He looked at his assistant, who was just coming to. Leave this dojo for 3 weeks and I expect you to apologize to him when you return. Turner and your classmates, is that clear? He nodded, standing shakily. The look he gave me was full of anger. I promised myself I would never turn my back on him. I got comfortable and enjoyed the class. About 6 weeks later, the teacher asked me to spar with him. It was an honor I couldn't turn down. Even though I gave it my all, it was clear he could defeat me any time. But at the end of the match, I surprised him with a move I learned before. Before he knew it, I had him on the ground, trying to make him tap out. He barely escaped. The class was stunned. He asked me to stay for a few minutes after class. I thought he would scold me, but I was wrong. Good match. Have you ever considered joining tournaments? With your speed, you could do really well. I looked at his trophy case. There weren't many trophies because he was new to the area and had only participated in a couple of tournaments. The more trophies a sensei had, the more popular they were. Everyone likes a winner. I hadn't really thought about it. I started martial arts for self-defense and I really enjoyed it. Do you really think I could do well? So just like that, I got into the competitive side of martial arts. I was really nervous at my first tournament, and it showed. It was point fighting, so there were no heavy hits. The goal was to score points by getting past my opponent's defenses and making contact like I would in a real fight. Strikes below the belt or other sensitive areas were not allowed. I had to adjust to these rules. I made it to the quarterfinals before I was eliminated. My sensei was happy with how I performed and gave me extra training. I gained weight and reached 180, the heaviest I had ever been. In my next tournament, I made it to the semifinals and received a small trophy. The next time, I won, and I did well in about 5 out of 6 tournaments over the next year. I was surprised to see Chandra at these events. The sensei encouraged her to compete to bring in more students. I had to admit she was skilled and won most of her matches. The women usually competed first. She reached the finals facing a larger and skilled opponent. She was holding her ground until she noticed me in the audience. This distracted her, and her opponent was able to win. Her sensei was very upset, scolding her in front of everyone until one of the officials intervened. Chandra was in tears. I felt sorry for her and wanted to comfort her, but my match was next. I had the advantage because I saw her first. So when I noticed her in the stands, I focused on the fight. I made it to the final match, with her cheers echoing in my ears. Sadly, it was one of the rare matches I lost. Still, we both received a small trophy to add to our collections. She was waiting for me when I came out of the dressing room. "Hi, Bobby. Good match. I see your skills are improving." She looked surprised when I smiled. "Thanks, Chandra. I'm sorry you didn't win your match. I noticed you finally got your black belt. Congratulations." She let out a sigh. "Thanks. I worked hard for it. Have you received yours yet?" I had a blue belt, which in my school was similar to a first-degree black belt in hers, but I kept that to myself. "I'm working on it." I checked my watch. "Sorry, Chandra. I have to go. It was nice to see you." I didn't really have somewhere to be. I just didn't want to admit that being around her brought back old feelings. I still missed her. She looked even more down. "I understand, Bobby. It was nice seeing you. I guess I'll see you at the next tournament." She turned to leave, but then looked back. "Bobby, I just want to say I'm sorry. I realize I acted immaturely. I regret what I did and what I lost. I just wanted you to know." Before I could respond, she hurried down the hall. I thought about her often over the next few weeks and saw her at almost every tournament. She was getting better and more confident. I had earned my black belt. I didn't wear them much. I was more interested in the skills they represented. The guy I had beaten in the dojo still bothered me when the teacher wasn't around, making the other students uneasy. They reminded him that his first attempt hadn't gone well. I wasn't sure if he was in a bad mood or just being rude, but he made a derogatory comment about Chandra. "Still seeing that girl? How is it? I hear they start young. What's the matter? Can't get a date with someone else?" He didn't get the reaction he wanted. "I wouldn't know about that. That's your area. And it's great, by the way. You know what they say? Once you go black, you never go back. I hope you can at least do better in relationships than you can in fights." I clapped my hand to my elbow, recalling what happened last time. Around half the class was black, and they were watching us in disbelief. "He's right, Greg. You've been inappropriate with me during practice. It was boring. You've made it clear you'd like to be with me but wouldn't want to be seen in public with me. Honestly, I'm glad, as being seen with you would hurt my reputation." The speaker was an attractive black woman in her 30s. It seemed Greg had tried to impress her at some point. He lost all color and charged at me, stopping just short. He stepped on my foot, and I realized I might be in trouble. If he pushed me back and didn't step off, I could end up hurt. He knew I would need to take him with me to avoid trouble, and he was ready to stop me. Instead of grabbing him, I leaned closer and gave him a strong headbutt. I think I felt something break. This caught him off guard, and I seized the moment to throw him over my head as I lowered myself to the ground. Before he could get back up, I was on top of him, ready to give him a serious lesson. It took all 3 helpers to keep me from moving. My teacher stepped in front of me. "Calm down," he said softly. I instantly stopped fighting. Some of the older students were holding Greg down. He looked at Greg and said, "You're bringing shame to your classmates and your dojo. Didn't you learn anything during your time away?" Before Greg could respond, a woman who had spoken earlier bowed to the teacher. "I respect you, but I can't stay in a dojo that has him as a representative. Good night." By the end, half of the class from all backgrounds walked out. He looked at Greg. "I could let you fight, and Bobby would likely win. He might even really hurt you. But it's better that I ban you. It's for your own good, and for the dojo. You have talent, but you need to manage your anger. I hope you find someone who can teach you what you need to learn. Now go." He turned to me with a sad expression. "And you, Bobby, I expected better from you." For the first time, I felt embarrassed about how I handled the situation. Then he smiled. "Your consequence will be to take his place as an assistant here. You're ready for it, and I suddenly need the help." So, I started spending 3 nights a week and 2 Saturdays a month at the dojo on top of my day job. I seem to have a knack for teaching, so I led the kids' class 2 nights a week. Chandra and I kept running into each other at competitions. We stayed friends, but nothing more. Then one day, as I was leaving a tournament, I saw her next to my Jeep. "I missed my ride because I wanted to watch you fight. I don't have a way home. I promise I'll be quiet. Please, Bobby." She spoke quickly, like the words were spilling out. I knew I couldn't leave her, so I opened the door for her. We drove in silence for a little while before I stopped at McDonald's. She looked at me with wide eyes. "Are you hungry? I didn't have breakfast." Her smile brightened the moment. "What do you want?" I played along. "It's McDonald's. Order whatever you'd like. You know my choice." I handed her a 20 and went to the restroom. I stood next to her in line, catching a few curious looks. We ate mostly in silence. "Bobby, can we talk?" she asked. "About what?" "About how I messed up. You were right. I acted immaturely. I had a great chance and I let it slip away. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm sorry, and I really wish I could go back and change things." She could see I was a bit uncomfortable, so she quickly continued. "I know it might not matter to you now, but I've never been with Marcus or anyone else since we got together. It was wrong of me to go to that party. I didn't mean to hurt you. You were busy and I just wanted to have some fun. I had too much to drink. I'm really sorry." She would have said more, but I interrupted her. "Stop, Chandra. I understand. It's all in the past. Now before we go, do you want a shake? You still have my change. I'd like 1 too chocolate." She started to smile and kept smiling until we got home. 5 miles down the road, she took my hand and I didn't pull away. She encouraged me to say hi to her grandmother and Gail, so I did. Her grandmother looked at me. "Well, you're the last person I expected to see again. How are you, son?" I had always liked her, so I smiled back. "Pretty hungry. I haven't had a good slice of pie in months. Just a hint, Gram." "You must be the luckiest boy around. I just took a chocolate pie out of the oven. It's still warm. I'll make some coffee." Sandra seemed a bit jealous of Gail and her grandmother while we caught up. Gail had just 1 more quarter to complete her nursing diploma from the community college. "That's great! It's always helpful to have a nurse in the family." I think she blushed. She didn't get much praise. Graham gave me the rest of the pie to take home. Sandra walked me to the door. She wanted to say something but changed her mind. "I'll see you at the next tournament, Bobby." She kissed me on the cheek and quickly went back inside. She was waiting by my car the next 2 times we were at tournaments together. We slipped back into our old routine, eating fast food and chatting while enjoying whatever dessert her grandmother had made. The next time, she didn't ride back with me, and I had to admit I missed her on the drive home. She had left an envelope on the seat of my Jeep. It was an invitation to her high school graduation in 2 weeks. I told my teacher not to plan anything for me that week. I dressed in my best suit, bought a nice bouquet of flowers and a gift card to a nice women's store. I sat with Graham and Gail and got a few curious looks. Sandra's eyes filled with tears when she saw me. I had a niece and a nephew graduating too, so after the ceremony I congratulated them and gave them their gifts. One set of parents was polite, but the other, especially the mother, was quite rude. I was confused until I realized they were unhappy with where I sat during the ceremony. I left and went back to Gail and Graham. Sandra was there looking around. She seemed close to tears. Her face brightened when she saw me, and she began to cry when I handed her the flowers. I opened my arms and she moved in close, hugging me tightly. "Thank you, Bobby, for the gifts. But most of all for being here. It really means a lot." Ignoring the curious looks from people around us, I took the girls to my car and insisted on treating them to dinner. We went to the most upscale restaurant in town. When we entered, the hostess gave us a long look before showing us to a table tucked away near the back. I was about to ask for a better spot, but Gail touched my arm. "Get used to it if you're spending time with us," she said quietly. Fast food places don't mind much, but this restaurant's owner is known for having certain views. He can't stop us from coming in, but he doesn't have to make us feel welcome. Even though the greeting was cold, we ended up having a great time. I drove them home afterward, and each one gave me a quick goodbye kiss. Chandra's lasted a little longer, bringing a smile to my face. The next day, Chandra showed up at my door. As soon as I opened it, she stepped inside, crossing her arms with a determined expression. "I'm a little upset with you, Bobby." Surprised, I asked, "Why's that?" She gave a small smirk. "You forgot my birthday. I turned 18 2 weeks ago and you didn't even get me a card." I felt my face warm with embarrassment. I had completely missed it. "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "Let me make it up to you. Just tell me what you want, and it's yours." She looked at me, her gaze unwavering. "I want to be a real part of your life, Bobby," she said softly. "I want to be in your heart." "Please, Bobby, what are you doing?" Chandra gasped softly. We lay side by side, lost in the moment. The world around us faded, and there was only the warmth of connection, the closeness we both craved. Eventually, as we relaxed together, we drifted off to sleep, wrapped in a quiet calm. Over the following weeks, Chandra slowly became a bigger part of my life. After much convincing, she moved in with me. Our days were simple but happy, focused on learning about each other in every way. When we did go out, we were so absorbed in each other that we hardly noticed the stares. As the months passed, we couldn't ignore the reactions around us. People sometimes claim they understand, but when they actually see it, it's different. At first, the comments and looks were subtle. Chandra noticed right away, though she'd grown so used to it that she mostly shrugged it off. When we became engaged, however, things changed. It got harder. One Sunday, I brought Chandra to lunch with my family. They were polite but distant. Just before we left, my mother pulled me aside, her eyes filled with a sorrow I hadn't seen before. "I love you," she whispered, "but I can't accept this. Please don't bring her here again." After that, I didn't see my mother for 7 years. Most of my siblings distanced themselves as well. If we passed each other on the street, we didn't speak. At work, opportunities that once seemed open to me began to vanish, as though invisible walls had sprung up overnight. Yet despite the challenges, Chandra and I held strong. We had each other, and even when the world seemed cold, our home was a place of warmth and understanding. The production manager had certain views that troubled me, especially when less experienced individuals started getting promoted ahead of me. I felt it was time to move on. When I handed in my notice, the plant manager looked surprised. He asked me to come into his office. "I won't beat around the bush, Bobby. Why are you leaving?" he asked. He clearly didn't understand, I thought. "I'm leaving, sir, because I was passed over for promotions twice. Both went to people with less experience. I'm sure they will do well, but I am still training one of them. I'm ambitious. I've gotten married, and I hope to start a family. I need to grow in my career to support that." He looked shocked. "I asked why you didn't get those jobs, and Jerry said you weren't interested." I couldn't help but laugh a little. "Well, it seems I need to improve my communication skills too, but my decision is final. Thank you for the chances I've had here. I've learned a lot." Later, I heard that the plant manager began watching Jerry more closely, even warning him about his job. A few months later, Jerry confronted me in the grocery store parking lot. "You think you're better than me? You almost got me fired. Maybe we should teach you a lesson." It only made him angrier when I chuckled. "Why don't you try? I'd love to see you try it. You'll be an easy target." I stepped closer and he seemed to shrink back a little. In a low voice just for him, I said, "You don't have any control over me anymore. I don't work with you now. I wouldn't need much reason to stand up for myself if you tried anything. And if you cross that line, you'll regret it." He looked frightened. We got married by a justice of the peace just over the state line. The only witnesses we had were Gail and Graham. We took a 3-day trip to a beach that was known for being popular with the black community. Chandra looked great in her swimsuit, and I noticed some unhappy looks from a few young men. On our last night, we went for a walk on the beach. 3 men our age approached us, drunk, wanting to confront me. It was amusing when they threatened me, considering we were both trained in martial arts. I tried to keep the peace, but Chandra became impatient and easily controlled two of them while grinning at the third. Listen, my husband has a higher belt than I do. I chose him, and he gets upset when I don't support him. He glanced at her, then at me, and at his friends who were on the ground. He quickly decided to leave. Her laughter followed him as he walked away. We returned to our room, took a shower, and tried to enjoy a romantic evening together. We mostly succeeded. We were on the third floor, and I convinced her to spend some time together on the balcony. It was a beautiful night with a full moon, and the sight of us enjoying the moment together is something I'll always remember. She laughed a little at the end, and a voice from below called out, "Wow! You go, girl! Have fun!" Chandra giggled as I leaned against her back, admiring how happy we were. "I already have, sister," she said, grinning. The laughter from below followed us as we closed the door. That first summer will always stay in my mind. We broke my full-size bed, so we bought a sturdier queen size and almost broke that one too. I had to drive farther for my new job, and between that and working part-time at the dojo, our weekdays were pretty busy. I gave Chandra my Mustang, and she started a part-time job as an instructor at her old dojo. It didn't pay much, but it gave her something to do and some extra money. We still entered tournaments together. She was unsure, but I encouraged her to take some business classes at the community college. Once she got there, she started enjoying it and did well. We were together for 2 years before we began discussing starting a family. I was thinking about it. Chandra was just 20, and many of her friends were already mothers. Some even had 2 or more kids and were single. She didn't like what she saw. Think about it. Ginny never married, and now she has 3 kids from different fathers. She relies on child support and help from the government. Bobby has 2, Stella has 2, Gina has 1. None of them are married. We're different. She felt offended, thinking I was looking down on her friends just because they were black. That's not true. Wendy, Janice, Teresa, none of them are married either, and they're all white. I just mentioned the others because they were your friends. Now look at Anne. She and her husband have 2 kids and are really happy. Same with Joan, Brenda, and Alice, all with happy families and good husbands. The point is, you won't be alone. I will always be there. You can count on me to help with everything: feeding, comforting, being there when they're sick. She understood my point, but asked me to wait for another year. 10 days before my 25th birthday, we were blessed with a baby boy, Joshua Robert Turner, who weighed 8 pounds, 12 ounces. Chandra was in labor for 14 hours. The doctors encouraged her to be loud to help things move along, so she spent that time expressing herself a lot, mainly about me. Most of it was not very flattering, and she later joked that the next time better be easier, or what I heard would be quite a tale. Surprisingly, my youngest sister came to visit us in the hospital and even brought a little gift. She had stayed neutral, and was the only person I still talked to in my family. It had been almost 3 years since I connected with my mother. She misses you a lot, Bobby, especially at Christmas. She looks at your picture and cries. I remembered what I had said before. The day she calls me to visit, I'll go. Until then, it feels like she is gone to me, just like I am to her. My sister cried briefly before patting my arm. I see where your stubbornness comes from. I thought I would give it a try. He's a lovely baby, Chandra. Let's hope he doesn't get that trait. She leaned down and kissed her cheek, gave me a big hug, and then left. 3 years later, Chandra earned an associate degree in business and worked full-time at her dojo while waiting to hear back from the many job applications she sent out. She had a few interviews, but nothing came from them. She thought it was because she was black. She had grown from a pretty teenager to a stunning young woman in her early 20s. I couldn't imagine what she had to do to style her hair into those long, smooth strands. I once asked her why she didn't choose to wear a more natural style. Her reply about feeling like a nappy-headed Aunt Jemima surprised me. Since Chandra worked most evenings, I kept my job at my dojo. There was a lot of tension from my old teacher, especially after we had made up and gotten married. He even offered me a part-time job if I came back. I turned it down. One reason was that the sensei seemed unpredictable, and I didn't like how he had changed. Chandra said he didn't have a good home life. He had remarried a Japanese woman he met while finishing up his 10th degree belt. They apparently were not getting along well. I preferred the new sensei and his style. I couldn't explain why, but I felt it was better. Chandra was very loyal, and she seemed to get upset if I said anything that she thought was a slight. So I stopped bringing him up. I thought we were doing well. We argued like any young couple balancing work and a child, but it was nothing serious, and we always made up. She was spending more time at her dojo, saying she was preparing her advanced students for upcoming tournaments. It felt tense during tournaments, especially if someone we trained was competing. I kept my comments quiet, offering advice, pointing out areas to improve, and helping them stay calm. Chandra used the style of her sensei, often yelling and correcting them in public. It didn't help that my students usually won 75% of the time, no matter who they faced. My teacher was happy. His dojo was now much bigger than it had been 3 years ago. One time, I asked her if she knew about positive reinforcement while we were walking home from a tournament. She didn't talk to me for 2 days after that. She didn't adjust to being a mother quite as well as I thought she would. She loved Josh and was proud of him, but he seemed closer to me since I spent more evenings with him. Graham helped a lot with babysitting. She really cared for Josh, and with Gail now married, it filled her days. In June of that year, things started to change. Chandra became moodier and more distant. When I asked her about it, she blamed it on not finding a job that matched her degree. "Sweetheart, this is a small town. There aren't many jobs available. If you want to find something, you might need to look in other towns." She didn't like that idea. Unexpectedly, she wasn't a fan of driving. We decided to stop using the Mustang, but we kept it and got her a new car. It was a new Mustang, a sporty model. It was a manual, and she enjoyed shifting gears. I wished we had chosen a family car, but I let her get what made her happy. I traded in my old Jeep for a Cherokee. It still had four-wheel drive, but wasn't as suited for tough trails as my old one. It worked well for family trips, though. I sensed something was starting to change in our marriage. The passion we once had slowed down over the years, but we still found time to be close when we could. Then one day, she seemed distracted all the time, not really paying attention to Josh or me. Josh was a lovely boy, with skin like lightly creamed coffee. He was very smart, and I didn't just say that because I was his parent. By the time he was 4, he had learned to read simple words from Graham. I was sure he would be reading books at a higher level in no time. He was very much a daddy's boy since his mom worked at night. We had a strong bond playing games, reading, and watching TV together. Chandra usually got home around 8:30, and he would try to stay awake for her, but often he just ended up asleep. She would kiss him softly before heading to bed. One night she was complaining about her work hours. "I have a simple idea for you. Quit, or at least work less. I finally paid off the house, so we don't need the extra money that badly." She didn't respond positively. "I bet you'd love that. You want me stuck at home all day. Next, you'll be wanting another child, and that would keep me tied down forever." We were both taken aback by the harshness of her words. She apologized, but her words lingered in my mind. She began to stay later at the dojo, claiming it was to prepare for her next belt test. I had reached my limit locally and would need to travel to New York to train with a qualified master. I hoped to go one day. Then, things improved. She found a great job as a receptionist and assistant at a local office. She was overjoyed and treated herself to a new wardrobe. It lasted 6 months before she lost her job. There was a recession at that time, and the office closed down. They offered her a transfer, but the nearest position was 200 miles away. She was heartbroken. I was doing well at my new job. We made paper tubes mostly for the textile industry. The move to China was still about 12 years away. Even with the slow economy, our business was thriving. I started by running machines that created long tubes, and within a year, I was moved to the finishing area, where we cut and shaped the tubes for yarn. Before long, I became the lead worker just below management. My company was a large international firm involved in many things. They were often posting jobs in places like Australia, South Africa, France, and Canada. I was actually recruited for a position in Australia, but Chandra had just started a new job, and moving would have upset my grandmother, especially since we were taking care of Josh. One day I was asked to switch shifts because the night-led worker had an accident. It would only be for 2 weeks while he recovered. I agreed since it would look good on my record. They needed me the next day, so they let me go at noon to prepare. I wasn't too worried about it. Chandra had just lost her job, so we could look after Josh during the day, and my grandma could watch him until Chandra finished her class. My new car wasn't as loud as my old one, so they didn't hear me arrive. Chandra's teacher was parked in the driveway. It was a nice spring day, cool yet pleasant. Chandra had the windows open, letting fresh air come in to clear out the mustiness of winter. People weren't as reliant on air conditioning back then. As I approached the house, I could hear her making noise. I moved quietly around to our bedroom window. What I saw surprised me. There was Chandra and her teacher, and they were close together in a way that was both shocking and hurtful. His words were harsh, and she seemed to be enjoying it. That weak guy can't compare, can he? I felt a mix of anger and sadness. You're going to see what a real man can do, he said. I almost barged in when I noticed Josh's teddy bear. I hadn't thought about him in that moment. Realizing I might end up in a custody battle, I stepped back, got in my car, and drove away. I headed to the city park. Josh loved it there, and it was a good place to think. I wanted to get custody of him, and I knew I needed proof for court. With new technology, any camera would be big and hard to hide. I had a tape recorder on my dresser that I sometimes used to play music. You could get a recording that would last for 2 hours. If they talked like they did today, I might be able to use it in my custody case. I heard they planned to talk again tomorrow. I thought about sneaking in, starting the recorder, and waiting until they were really into their conversation. Then I would confront them and have the whole thing on tape. It was a simple plan, but it was the best I could come up with. For the first time in years, I had a troubling thought. Being white and her being black might give me an advantage. I felt bad for thinking that until I thought of Josh. I felt like we were heading into a fight, and every little advantage could help. I made a lot of noise coming back, but Jim was gone. She seemed surprised to see me. "Bobby, what are you doing home so early?" "Jim crashed his car. He'll be out for at least 2 weeks. They want me to take his shift. Sorry, but this could be good for me if it goes well." I watched her reaction. She handled it well. "That's great, honey. Late nights will be tough, but maybe this will help you get that promotion. I'll miss you when I go to bed." I smiled back at her. "Speaking of being home, we're both here. There won't be any little ones to bother us. How about we enjoy the afternoon together?" I saw a look of worry in her eyes. I knew Jim had just left, and I sensed something was off. "That sounds good. Let me take a quick shower first. I've been cleaning around the house all day." I playfully put my arms around her as she turned. "Hey, no worries about the shower. That will save time." She twisted out of my grasp. "Stop it, Bobby. I really need a shower." I wanted to see how far I could take it. "Okay, how about we shower together? We can make sure we're nice and clean." "No, just give me a minute." I observed her, noticing she wouldn't look at me directly. "What's going on? You seem tense. You want to shower before spending time together. It's like you're hiding something. Is there anything you want to share?" She turned pale before her cheeks filled with color. "You think I'm hiding something? That's ridiculous. If you think anything is happening now, you're dreaming." She hurried into the bathroom and locked the door. I decided to go get Josh. Graham noticed something was wrong. "You okay, Bobby? You don't look well." I gave her a tight hug, holding her close. Her eyes widened when I finally let go. We usually didn't touch much. "You know that Josh and I will always love you, right? No matter what happens." Tears filled her eyes. "What happened, Bobby? Can we fix it?" I let my own tears fall. "No, Graham, I don't think so." I picked up Josh and took him to McDonald's for a happy meal. I ignored the stares we got. One loud person tried to say something, but one look from me made them stop. I felt ready for anything, and people sensed it. I took deep breaths to calm myself. Once we got home, he excitedly showed his mom the toy from his meal, chatting happily like any joyful 4-year-old. I wondered how he'd feel in a few weeks. At home, Chandra seemed uneasy, moving carefully around me like she was stepping on eggshells. I mostly kept my distance, only responding when she spoke directly to me. She sat on the couch, looking unhappy, while I got Josh ready for bed. After he hugged her goodnight, I took him to his room and read him a story until he fell asleep. When I came back, she had changed into a soft, flowing gown, one she knew I liked. She gave me a hesitant smile. "Bobby, I'm sorry about earlier. I was just in a rough mood because I can't seem to find another job. Would you like to go to the bedroom with me so I can make it up to you?" She seemed taken aback when I quietly declined. It was probably the first time I had turned her down. "I don't feel up to it tonight. I said, meeting her eyes. "I still feel like you're not being open with me. You're different than you were a year ago. If something's wrong, now's the time to tell me. We can work through it." I had no real hope of us staying together, but I wanted to see if she'd be honest. Her expression shifted from pale to flushed. "You're such a jerk. Nothing's going on. You're imagining things. I just need some space." I kept my gaze steady until she looked away. "Then look me in the eye," I said. "Swear on Gail, Josh, and Graham that everything's fine between us, and I'll drop it. Swear it, Chandra." She looked furious, standing up without meeting my eyes. "Forget it. I'm going to bed, alone. You can enjoy the couch." I stood and gently but firmly turned her to face me. "I'm sleeping in my bed tonight. I paid for this house and I paid for that bed. If you have a problem with it, you're the one who should find somewhere else to sleep." With that, I went to the bedroom, leaving her in stunned silence. Surprisingly, I drifted off quickly. The next morning, I found her asleep in Josh's room. I left early without much conversation. From the woods, I watched her take Josh to her grandmother's house. Not long after, a familiar car pulled up the drive. I slipped in through the back door and started a recording device hiding nearby. A few minutes later, Chandra joined him, and they greeted each other with an embrace, clearly more than friendly. I took several clear photos from a distance, capturing everything. As I waited quietly, my frustration grew. By the time I re-entered the house, my emotions were difficult to contain. I slipped through the back door, moving silently until I reached the bedroom. There, I made my presence known, opening the door abruptly and voicing my anger. Both of them were caught off guard, freezing in place, realizing their actions had come to light. As I confronted him, we started fighting. Chandra was shouting for me to stop, and in the middle of it, I felt a blow from the side and everything went dark. I woke up in the hospital, then found myself in jail. It had been 3 days since the fight. I tried to sit up, but the pain held me down. The jailer, an old school friend, came over when he heard me stir. "Better stay still, Bobby. You took a real beating. Got a broken nose, fractured ribs, a busted finger, and bruises all over. He got you pretty good." I groaned. "Why am I in jail?" "You were out cold when they brought you in. They've charged you with assault both on her and him. Your wife filed a restraining order. Right now you've got nowhere else to go." After 2 days, I made bail. My friend, a deputy, agreed to go with me to pick up some clothes from the house. But when we arrived, I nearly lost it seeing him sitting on my couch. "What are you doing here?" I managed, holding back my anger. He gave a smug grin. "Chandra wanted me here. I think she's actually scared of you." Before I could respond, the deputy held me back. Chandra entered the room, avoiding my gaze. "Chandra, look at me," I said, holding back my frustration. "Are you sure this is what you want? This is your chance to be honest?" She gave me a cold look. "I've got nothing to say to you." I sighed. "All right. Just remember, you had a chance to make this right." I gathered my things and made sure to take my tape recorder with me. With the charges against me, I was in serious trouble. Aggravated assault was a major charge, and I didn't know what was coming next. Back in my rented room, I played the recording I'd gotten earlier. At first, there was silence. Then I heard the bedroom door open. Chandra's voice came through. "I don't know about this. Maybe we should stop for a while. Bobby knows something is up." He replied dismissively, brushing off her concern and making light of everything. Their conversation continued, making it clear what had been going on behind my back, with him gloating about how he'd tricked me. Hearing this was painful, but it gave me the clarity I needed. It wasn't easy, but now I understood the truth of the situation. There were about 5 more minutes of loud noises when the door swung open and I yelled out. After about 10 minutes of me trying to defend myself, everything became quiet. You could hear Chandra saying, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." Then she asked if he was okay. "No, I'm definitely not okay. Is my nose broken?" You could hear him wince as she tried to fix his nose. "Ow! That hurts. Thanks for helping me out." Chandra seemed to show some care. "I didn't do it for you, I did it for him. I thought he was going to really hurt you." He really surprised me. Chandra actually chuckled. "I wonder where he learned that from." There was a brief moment of silence before she spoke again. "You should leave. He's going to be really mad when he wakes up. What will we do?" He made a sound of frustration. We need to think of something. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. My wife will be furious. He'll probably leave you, but he might want to take your kid. We need to find a way to put the blame on him. How? There was a pause before he suddenly exclaimed, I have an idea. We'll say we were practicing for an upcoming tournament when he barged in, accused us of something, and started to hit you. I had no choice but to step in to protect you. You were scared and called the police. She seemed to consider it. But I don't have any marks on me, and he will tell his side too when he wakes up. I could hear myself moving and grunting as he nudged me. Chandra shouted for him to stop. Show him not to mess with me, he said finally. Once he got her to calm down, he told her to close her eyes. Why? Sorry, but if we want the police to believe us, I need to make it look convincing. If you see it coming, you might react. He made her lip bleed, gave her a bruise, and held her arms firmly enough to leave marks. The recording ended just after they called 911. I played the recording for my lawyer. He made 2 copies and gave one to the district attorney. The district attorney called them in and asked them to recount the day's events separately. They spoke with Chandra first, asking her to repeat what had led to me being taken to the hospital and then to jail. She repeated her statement almost exactly. Is this your official statement? Yes, it is. The district attorney sighed. He had a tape recorder during the interview and asked her to sign a paper copy after rewinding the tape. Once she signed it, he asked her to listen to the recording to check for accuracy. As soon as he played it, my voice was heard. Her eyes widened. He gestured to the deputy in the room. Chandra Turner, you are under arrest. As he read her rights, she looked shocked. She was seated and restrained. It felt like watching a building fall apart. She seemed to break down from within. Tears streamed down her face, and she made soft, whimpering sounds. I was watching from the other side of the mirror. There were serious charges against her. She was looking at 4 years in prison. She pointed fingers, saying it was all his fault, claiming she was forced into it. In the end, she had to move out and return Josh to me while she prepared for her trial. Grandma took her in, but not happily. We reached an agreement. I would drop the assault charges against them if they did the same for me. The other charges were not my concern since they occurred while I was unconscious. Plus, they needed to cover my hospital expenses. My divorce was not as difficult as I had feared. She couldn't contest custody while facing charges. I kept the house, but I had to pay her back for her half of the payments over the last 3 years, as she had contributed. She got part of the accounts, which was not a lot. I refinanced the house and settled with her. The money she received went to her lawyers. He was not as lucky. His wife divorced him after a fierce argument. It turned out she was skilled in fighting, having been trained by her grandfather. He lost his dojo. After the news spread, many married women left and took their children with them. No new students came, and he faced bankruptcy. He was found guilty of serious assault, a felony that meant he could never teach again. Under pressure from his statements about his relationship with her before she turned 18, he eventually confessed after Chandra provided a sworn statement that he had been involved with her since she was 14. This added further charges against him. He ended up serving 2.5 years and disappeared as soon as he was released. Chandra pleaded guilty to lesser charges and was placed on probation. I was granted full custody but allowed her to visit as often as she wanted. She saw him frequently since she lived with Grandma, who looked after Josh while I worked. She would have helped out for free, but I paid her because I knew she could use the extra money. After 8 months, Grandma gave Chandra a choice. She needed to find a job and move out. Chandra got a low-paying factory job putting socks into boxes. She disliked it, but it brought in some income. Ed never returned after his accident, and I took his position. Within a year, I became the night operations manager. A year later, I was offered a chance to go to Mexico to help set up a new plant. If I stayed for 2 years, they promised me a role as plant manager. I thought hard about it. It was an invaluable opportunity, and I believed Josh would benefit from experiencing another culture. He was already facing challenges with prejudice. I hoped another country might be a little more accepting. Since I had full custody of Josh and Chandra was still on probation, she couldn't stop me. In the end, she didn't even try to fight it. She asked to see me right before we left. I had nothing to lose, so I agreed. I want to apologize, Bobby. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I let you go. I'd give anything to have you back, but I know that's not possible." She seemed really nervous. "I'll probably be getting married soon. Since I can't have you, I'll have to take what I can get. Marcus is back. I'm sure you know he got hurt after a year in the pros. He has some money and is trying to buy into a car dealership. It's almost done. We've been dating and he really cares about me." I kept my thoughts to myself. Time would tell. If she was just settling for the best choice, it would probably not last. We were leaving right after Christmas. Josh was 7 now, old enough to understand we were going far away. He felt both sad and excited. Graham was heartbroken. I tried to convince her to come with us, but she was scared to leave her friends. I made sure she got to spend as much time as possible with Josh. What surprised me most was how my mother reacted. When everything happened, I was unconscious for 36 hours. They had put me into a coma to check my head injuries. My sister was listed as my emergency contact after Chandra, and when they told her, she informed the family. I woke up to see my mom sitting beside me holding Josh. I thought I was dreaming. "Mom?" She didn't say anything at first as she gently placed Josh down. Then she hugged me tightly, crying. "I thought I lost you. Then I realized I had lost you years ago. I just needed to see you and make sure you would be okay. I want you to know I love you and I'm truly sorry for how I treated you all these years. I'll leave now." I didn't let go of her. "Please, Mom, stay. I love you too." The tears came stronger for a while. Once she calmed down, I asked her what she thought of Josh. "He's adorable, and so smart he must get that from you. He has his grandfather's chin." She stayed, holding my hand. My sister and Graham went to get coffee and ran into Gail. When they heard I was awake, they all came back with tears of joy. Josh and I shared a look of wonder. We mended our relationship and my family came around except for one older brother. He learned to be quiet at Sunday dinners pretty quickly, so he tolerated Josh and me. That was enough. He finally warmed up a bit when he gave Josh a slingshot he had made and taught him how to use it. After he hit all 8 cans in a row, he beamed with pride. "Thank you for teaching me, Uncle John." I noticed him flinch a little, but he placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're welcome, son." Mom smiled with joy. She got upset when I told her we were moving to Mexico. "No, I just got you back. Please, son, stay." I never really talked about how much Chandra had hurt me. I pretended to be fine, but there were many mornings when I woke up with tears on my cheeks. I had given up everything, even my family, to be with her. And she let me down without a second thought. I needed to get away, and this was a great chance. I thought it might help me heal, and I hoped it would be a better place for Josh. Finally, the day arrived. Grandma, Gail, and my family were all there. Tears were flowing. Chandra came, hugging Josh tightly. "Look, we're not too far away. We will be back, or you can come see us. I'm just a phone call away. We love you all, but it's time to go." I looked back just before we went through the gate to see Grandma and my mom hugging. A nice way to leave. We arrived in Mexico, in a small town about 40 miles from Mexico City. The change was immense. I knew I was in a new world when I asked where the quality control equipment was, and they took me to the back, where it was still in shipping crates, exposed to the weather. Some of it was damaged. There was also a large pasture. Very few of our workers had cars. They used bikes, scooters, motorcycles, donkeys, and horses, or just walked. One of the biggest challenges was getting the workers to arrive on time. They saw the start time as more of a suggestion. I brought them in small groups, explained our goals in detail, gave them a week to adjust, and started enforcing the attendance policy. After I let go of the first 3 workers, the others started to follow the rules. I rehired those 3 after 6 months and didn't have any more issues. Another difference was how they took lunch. At home, we worked 8 hours straight with just 20 minutes for lunch without stopping the machines. Here, it was hard to limit lunch to 1 hour. For them, lunch was like a big event. Don't get me wrong. They were great workers, loyal, smart, and quick to learn. We paid about twice what others in the area paid, so we hired the best. There were 2 other factories in town, a shirt factory and a knitting mill, and there was some jealousy. Those factories had to raise wages to keep their workers. It took 6 months to get production running smoothly. We often worked a lot of extra hours during that time, but the workers weren't too happy about it. I found that surprising. "We work to live, boss," explained Carlos, one of the main guys. "We don't live to work." That was an interesting idea for someone from America. The main roads in town were fine, especially the one leading to Mexico City. The smaller roads were not paved. Some were smooth, while others were rough and bumpy. I had my reliable Cherokee and a 750cc Triumph motorcycle with me, which I bought before we traveled. A smaller bike would have been easier, but I had always liked British motorcycles. It was my main way to get around. Josh enjoyed his time in Mexico. As a child, he picked up the language much faster than I did. He made friends easily because kids are the same everywhere, and no one paid attention to his skin color. In fact, if it weren't for his hair, he looked like a local with his light brown skin. He went to a school made just for us, with about a dozen kids from kindergarten to high school. The classes were in 2 rooms, with younger kids in one and older ones in the other. There were 3 teachers for each room. The company took care of everything. Even with simple conditions, the learning was good. We stayed in a small area for a while, but then a house I really liked became available. It was an old plantation house left over from when big farms used to be in the area. Though the land was gone, the house and grounds were still nicely kept. It was a low, spacious house with wide porches, shaped like a square U, with the living room, dining room, and kitchen in the middle, and the bedrooms in the wings. The red tile roof looked nice against the fresh white walls. There was a barn, 10 acres of pasture, and a large area for a garden if we wanted one. The house also came with a maid, a cook, and a groundskeeper, all from one family living in a separate 3-bedroom bungalow. I got the house, including rent and wages, for less than what I paid for my home. I received a $10,000 raise for coming here and saved half my pay while still having plenty left. I let Gail and Graham live in my house for free. What can I say about the food? I loved it. Always a fan of spicy food, Mrs. Rodriguez started out with mild dishes for Josh and me. But when I tasted what she made for her family, I jokingly said I would let her go if she didn't cook the same for us. She smiled and turned up the heat. Josh could handle the spice with no problem. I insisted that they join us for dinner. It created a family atmosphere that we all valued. At first they were shy, but soon they were just as talkative as any family. Josh affectionately called them aunt and uncle, which they appreciated. Serafina, their 17-year-old daughter, worked as our maid. She was saving money to get married. Since I paid her, I knew her wages as a maid weren't high, so I helped her find a job at the plant when she turned 18. Mrs. Rodriguez brought in her sister to take her place. She seemed upset that I was single, and before long I noticed that her nieces and friends would come for Sunday dinners. She would give hints by pointing out their qualities. Look at her, Berto. She would make a great mother, and see how fit she is? She's from a good family. They were down-to-earth folks. Even with her efforts and the girls showing interest, I remained single. I was still hesitant about relationships. Back then, there were no cell phones, so we wrote letters and called our family once a month. Gail sometimes wrote me long letters. She mostly avoided personal topics, but would occasionally mention Chandra, who married Marcus and was expecting a baby. Interestingly, I didn't feel as upset as I might have before. It seemed distant. Sometimes I would notice traits of Chandra in Josh, and it would bring back memories. We were once happy, or at least I was, but I questioned if she had ever really felt satisfied. Growing up without a father figure may have made it difficult for her to have good role models, and that guy Marvin introduced her to relationships too early. But that was no longer my concern. What I missed most about home was my dojo. There was nothing similar nearby. I had my equipment and worked out 4 times a week, but it didn't feel the same. I started teaching Josh martial arts when he was 4. Now at 8, if he took a test, he would be at least a brown belt in the Japanese style and a green belt in the Chinese style. Our neighbors saw us as rich gringos, which made their kids want to come over for our snacks. Tia Rodriguez kept an eye on them to make sure they didn't eat too much. She complained a bit, but coming from a big family herself, she enjoyed having a lot of kids around. She often made many of the snacks. I ended up teaching about 6 boys and 4 girls the basics twice a week. The boys initially complained about having girls in the class, but they soon got used to it. Josh helped me teach. I aimed to teach them respect and self-control, something I still struggled with at times. I learned that the more skilled you become, the more calm you are. Eventually, you reach a point where you don't have to prove anything to anyone, including yourself. I hadn't quite reached that point, but I was trying. New equipment arrived from Brazil, and they sent an engineer to help us set it up. Roberto was a small man, about 5 feet 5 and 140 pounds, but he was very knowledgeable and a good guy. I had him stay with me so he wouldn't have to travel all the way from Mexico City. He watched me teach my Saturday class. They had been training for 12 weeks and were making good progress. I bought some fabric, and Tia Rodriguez and her sister made uniforms for everyone. I wanted them to feel like they were part of something special. They would wear their uniforms proudly to practice and then change out of them at the end. Tia would wash the uniforms and have them ready for the next practice. We were the only ones with a washing machine. I was certified to teach, so I reached out to my former instructor, who sent me the necessary paperwork. It only cost a small fee, and I could teach up to the 2nd degree black belt level. I continued to teach a mix of styles, ensuring they learned the necessary skills for the Chinese method. Roberto smiled as he watched and asked about the style. I explained the mix of techniques. "Ah," he said, "I'm the same. I have a belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I also practice lucha libre wrestling, which is a form of competitive wrestling. The Mexican version is quite popular on TV." And it really was. Twice a week, on Thursday nights and Saturday afternoons. Josh loved it and had his favorite wrestlers. I remember him cheering loudly one night at the screen. It wasn't just him. Famous wrestlers were treated like celebrities, and fans would gather to watch them in local bars. Almost every town of a decent size had its own gym, where aspiring wrestlers could train and compete. They might not earn much, but it helped them chase their dreams, and some even made it to the big leagues. We talked about different fighting styles for nearly 2 hours before we took a break to get ready to leave. We were heading to Mexico City for the night, and I had already booked our hotel. I hadn't been in a serious relationship yet, so about once a month, I would leave Josh with Tio Rodriguez and head into Mexico City. The nightlife was lively, with many clubs, and I enjoyed the fun. We arrived at our hotel, got dressed, had a nice dinner, and then visited some clubs. The dances were a bit different here, but if you can learn martial arts, dancing isn't too difficult. Serafina and her cousins taught me a lot while their husbands and dates laughed at me until they couldn't anymore. Then they would jump in to help. I wasn't the best dancer, but I held my own. We danced until 3 in the morning, meeting 2 wonderful women who were interested in foreigners. Our hotel was close, so we walked back, linked arms, laughing and enjoying ourselves. Then, out of nowhere, 5 guys approached us, wearing casual clothes that didn't fit the party vibe. They blocked our path. "You need to give us some money, gringo. Hand over your wallet, and maybe we won't cause you any trouble." I glanced at Roberto. He had a small smile on his face, moving a bit while he looked at them. The girls had come up behind us. Roberto raised his hands. "Please, friends. It's a lovely night. The moon is bright. We have 2 beautiful ladies with us. This is a time for fun, not trouble." He kept his hands raised, still swaying a little. "Give us your money, you foolish tourists, before we make things difficult for you." I grinned at the leader. "Do you have any weapons or anything?" This surprised him for a moment. Then he started shouting, calling us names and saying bad things about the girls. I was done with it. "Just move aside and no one will get hurt. If you try to stop us, we'll walk right past you. You have 10 seconds. He opened his mouth and I closed it with a punch. He fell down, unconscious. I heard a noise, and Roberto had his opponent on the ground, too. I looked at the other 3. "We're going to start walking now." I stepped on the leader's foot as I passed. Even out cold, he tried to protect himself. I walked past him, and soon we found a clear path ahead. We spotted a policeman at the next corner, and I told him there were 2 drunks behind us. He quickly called for help. Drunks weren't good for visitors. Roberto just smiled. Women often react strongly to chaos, especially if it happens around them. Our girls were lively, laughing and having fun while we relaxed. We enjoyed a nice meal, put them in a cab, and shared phone numbers, knowing we might not meet again. Roberto and I sparred a few times. He was fast and got the better of me a few times, but I held my own too. If it ever got serious, it would be quite a match. He also encouraged me to visit a local wrestling gym to watch them practice. It was entertaining, but I noticed not many had real martial arts skills. I kept my expression neutral, not wanting to offend anyone. Roberto and the gym owner talked about the differences in the wrestling styles. Roberto seemed to believe Brazil was better because of its jiu-jitsu influence. It was a friendly debate. They simply agreed to have different views. There was one guy there who stood out, much taller than the others, likely over 6 feet and 220 pounds. He had some skills, but came off as quite full of himself. He noticed me watching. "So, do you like what you see?" I kept my smile calm. "Yes, it's always interesting to see new styles." I could tell he wanted me to be more impressed. "Do you think you'd want to try it, Mr. Karate?" "No, I'm just here with a friend, enjoying the view. Thanks anyway." His friends were watching now, which made him boast even more. I was getting bored, having seen this kind of situation many times. "So, are you scared?" I simply smiled. "Absolutely." The other wrestlers laughed, knowing it wasn't true. He turned red and then started rambling, his words a jumble I could barely understand. He questioned where I came from, suggesting I wasn't truly human, as if I were from goats and pigs. I listened quietly with a smile. When he finally stopped talking, he glared at me. "So, are you too afraid to stand up for yourself?" I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't resist teasing him a bit. I don't mind fighting when it's against someone with honor. Anything else is not worth my time. "Why? Do you know any honorable people?" I observed his movements closely. It was as if he had prepared a long message about when he would swing. I shifted my weight and let his punch miss. I should have just walked away, but I lightly patted his cheek as he passed. Everyone in the gym knew that if I had hit him, he would have been knocked out. He was about to charge me when his friends and the gym owner stepped in between us. The owner wanted to know what happened. The guy claimed I disrespected his place. "Is this true?" he asked the group. No one gave a clear answer. I tried to calm things down by apologizing to the owner. I explained that I didn't mean to disrespect him or his place, just in misunderstanding because of how we spoke. The guy was clever and realized that while I had apologized to him, I hadn't to the wrestler. "Oh, a misunderstanding then? No problem. Thank you for coming. Visit us again soon." Later, while we shared a beer, Roberto laughed about the whole thing. "Why didn't you fight him?" "I didn't need to." "Friend, you still don't understand how we Latins think. He feels you challenged his pride. He won't forget this easily. Just a tip, avoid dark alleys at night for a while." Roberto stayed for 3 more weeks and we practiced together every day. I absorbed his knowledge like a sponge. I took him to the airport when it was time for him to leave and wished him well. I never saw him again. I brought Josh home for a 3-week visit. My mom, Gail, and Graham were at the airport. Tears filled their eyes when they spotted us. We hugged tightly until we felt squeezed. We stayed in our old house with Gail sharing a room with Graham. I took the smaller room, and Josh slept on the couch. Things weren't going well for Gail. Her boyfriend of 4 years broke up with her for another woman. This hurt her deeply. She had also lost her job at the hospital and was now working in a rest home for half the pay. "I need to get away, Bobby, start fresh, but I don't have the money. Plus, Graham is getting older and someone needs to take care of her." I thought about it for a while catching up with friends and family. Then I made a few calls. I had seen one of Gail's resumes on her dresser, so I sent it out. Besides short visits, we had been away for almost 3 years. Things were slowly changing. I noticed more mixed couples at restaurants and movies, and few people seemed to care. Without telling Josh, I bought a nearly new 125cc Yamaha motorcycle and had it shipped home. It was meant to be a surprise for his 11th birthday. Chandra spent some time with him, but they felt like strangers now. Both seemed relieved when they said goodbye. Chandra didn't look her best. I saw her once when she picked up Josh for the first time. She had probably gained a lot of weight, and it didn't suit her well. "Still working on your black belt?" I asked. She gave a bitter laugh. "I haven't practiced martial arts in 2 years. "Why not? You used to love it just like I did." When Marvin went away, I couldn't find another place to train that I liked. I worked out with friends for a while, but then I just stopped. It reminded me of memories I didn't want to revisit. She had married Marcus and showed me a picture of them with their little girl. He had always been big in school, but he must weigh a lot now. Gail mentioned that they weren't getting along well. Just before she left, she put her hand on my arm. "I know I already said this, Bobby, but I'm sorry. I should have been a better partner to you. I felt insecure, worried you would leave me for someone else. I should have trusted you more. I didn't know how to respond, so I just wished her well in her new life." A few days before we were set to leave, Gail came in holding a letter. "You did this, didn't you?" I knew what she meant and didn't try to deny it. Yes, the contract for our plant nurse was ending, and she mentioned wanting to go home. This will be good for you, Gail. Good pay, a free place to stay, and a chance to learn new things. It will also look great on your resume. What about Graham? Easy. We'll take her with us. She told me Marcus hardly lets her see her granddaughter, so she doesn't have a reason to stay. It took 2 days to convince her, and Josh finally talked her into it on a trial basis. When we got back home, Tia Rodriguez welcomed 2 new family members. She and Graham got along well right from the start. I knew everything was going to be fine when I came home one day and found Graham in the kitchen, learning how to make tres leches cake. My students quickly accepted her once they figured out how to pronounce Graham. Gail flourished, diving into her job with enthusiasm. Soon she was volunteering at the town clinic twice a week for 4 hours. The company allowed her to do this while getting paid, as many of the clinic's patients were our workers and their families. About 2 months later, she surprised me by knocking on my door late one night. Her room was directly across the hall from mine. "Bobby, I need to ask you something. It's hard for me, can I?" I was curious about where this would lead, so I nodded. "I know why you travel to Mexico City, I understand. Men can often get away with things, but women can't." I had a feeling where this was going. "I'm 32, Bobby. I have needs, and I don't know how to address them. I want your help. Before you say anything, I want to be clear. I'm not in love with you, and you're not in love with me. This is just a temporary arrangement. I can handle that if you can." She walked in wearing a robe, then let it fall away, revealing herself. She was lovely in her own way. She had a different father than Chandra, and her skin was lighter. She was taller, and her figure was different. I noticed her smile when she looked at me. "I can see you like my offer," she said with a grin. She had a natural ease about her, moving gracefully and effortlessly, and I found it hard to keep up. I tried my best, though. When we were finished, she gave me a gentle kiss and said, "My sister should have thought more carefully," before quietly leaving. I stopped going to Mexico City. If I met someone better there, it might cause trouble. Did we love each other? Yes, but not in a deep way. We understood it was just for now, so we made the best of our time together. Carlos Vittorio Sanchez, a wrestler, still remembered me. He claimed he would eventually catch me and teach me a lesson, but we hadn't crossed paths yet. His son, Carlos Jr., was proud of his dad and used that to tease my friend Josh. Carlos Jr. had noticed Josh around town and tried to provoke him, but Josh always kept his cool because he had friends with him. For Josh's birthday, I gave him a bike. He was thrilled. I told him he could only ride in the pasture and around the property until he got the hang of it. There was a trail that went through nearby farms all the way to town, 2 miles away. I insisted he ask for permission from every landowner before he rode to town. When I finally let him go, he grabbed his best friend, Angel, and they headed to town together. Angel was a sweet 12-year-old who was really fast and tricky to keep up with. The only one who could beat her was Josh, and sometimes she even challenged him. I had just given her an orange belt, which was 2 levels higher than beginner. She was the first student to reach that rank. I think Angel was wiser than most kids her age, and I had a feeling she might see Josh as something more. Of course, Josh wouldn't notice that. They went to a movie and got sodas at a small cafe next to the cinema. That's when Carlos Jr. found them and started a confrontation. Carlos Jr. was a big kid, about 5'9" and 170, while Josh was 5'5" and 120. Josh tried to ignore him until Carlos Jr. started saying mean things about Angel. He noticed Josh turning red and knew he was getting to him. With 4 friends around him, Carlos Jr. became a little too bold. Before they knew it, 2 of his friends sneaked up behind them and grabbed Angel. She remembered her training and stayed calm. The older couple who owned the cafe came out and told them to leave her alone. Junior laughed and said they would let her go when they were done. Josh sighed and took charge of the situation. "So, this is your idea of being brave? 5 of you against 1 girl? You're so tough, Carlos." Carlos turned red while his friends laughed. Josh continued before Carlos could respond. "You really want to do this? Let the girl go and come down this alley, just you and me, here and now." Carlos sneered. "No, I want everyone to see how badly I can beat you. Then maybe if you beg enough, we'll let her go, unhurt. Maybe we'll have some fun with her first." Josh got upset. "Then go ahead and swing. You asked for it, so start it." The fight was quick and messy. Carlos swung but missed, and Josh moved in fast. He landed 2 quick punches to the face and then kicked Carlos in the stomach. Everyone heard the breath leave his body. Josh knocked Carlos down, holding his arm in a way that could cause pain if he pushed harder. "Give up!" Carlos pounded the ground, trying to find a way out. Josh tightened his grip. Carlos nearly screamed in pain. "I give up!" Josh applied a bit more pressure. "Say it louder and say sorry to Angel." "I give up! I'm sorry! Please let me go!" Josh let him go and quickly got back on his feet. He looked at Angel and gave her a nod. She stepped on the boy, holding her, making him bend over in pain. When he leaned forward, she pulled back suddenly, causing him to bleed from his nose. He stumbled back, holding his nose and crying. Angel and Josh stood back to back, ready for what might come next, but the fight had left their opponents. The others made some noise before quietly slipping away, the laughter of onlookers following them. When Carlos Sr. heard what happened, he got very angry. He scolded Junior for losing and rushed to my house. A few of his friends and the gym owner came too, most wanting to see a fight, some hoping to stop it. Angel and Josh told me what took place, and I couldn't blame them for how they handled it. They didn't start the trouble and only fought as a last resort. Still, I felt a bit annoyed when they arrived. He charged into the yard and jumped out of his truck, running toward me while yelling. He was surprised when I didn't back away, but instead ran at him, jumping and landing a hit on his neck. He fell forward into the dirt. While he struggled to get up, I approached the gym owner. "If you hold him down, I have an idea that could earn you some money." 2 of his friends helped him back to his feet. When he calmed down, I got close to him, wanting to see him really angry. "So," I said with a mocking smile, "you sent a group of older kids to bully a 12-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. How brave of you. Your guy deserved to be put in his place, but I can see where he learned that behavior. Do you want to fight me? Here's the deal. We'll fight next Saturday night, in the arena. We won't stop until one of us can't continue. I'll put down $1,000 and you do the same. The winner takes all. Can you manage that much?" He turned red with rage, then pale when he heard about the money. $1,000 was a lot at that time. His pride made him agree. "All right, I'll see you Saturday. The fight only starts when the money is with the judges." The arena was the local bullfighting venue. They would set up a smaller ring there for a better view. News spread about the fight, and the seats sold out quickly. Diego, the gym owner and local promoter, was smiling from ear to ear. Tia Rodriguez made me a mask, saying that all lucha libre wrestlers wore them as part of their style. At first I wasn't sure about it, but once I tried it on and found that it didn't block my vision or movements, I felt okay. My family and friends were in the box I had saved for them. I invited Angel and her mother, but they hadn't arrived yet. Many of my friends and co-workers were there. Most didn't know I trained in martial arts. We were the last fight of the night, so I watched the earlier matches closely, looking for patterns and weaknesses. There was less striking and more grappling, which I would use to my advantage. Finally, the last match finished. Diego let the crowd wait for a moment to build excitement before speaking into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the final match of the night. You've heard this is a grudge match for bragging rights and more. We will see our local style face off against one from another country." The crowd booed when he said that. "Now, let me introduce our competitors. From our own town, the Matador." He strutted out wearing a mask that looked like a bull breathing fire, with a matador hat and a red cape. He wore bright red tights that matched his mask. The audience loved his look. And his opponent from America, the Gringo. I wore a mask decorated in red, white, and blue, with a big yellow star in the middle. It was shiny and stood out. Instead of tights, I wore a dark blue Chinese GI that flowed like a dress. This outfit would help hide my legs, which was important for my style of fighting. When they announced me, I performed 2 backflips and landed in a split, showing off a little. They wanted a show, and I was ready to give it to them. We met in the center of the ring for the traditional greeting. I reached out my hand, but he did not take it. Before the referee realized what was happening, I grabbed the back of his head and pulled him in for a quick kiss. When I pulled away, I smiled. "That was for Yolanda. Tell her I enjoyed last night, and I will give her the 10 pesos after the fight." Yolanda was his oldest daughter, known for being quite friendly. I had never met her, but he didn't know that. If I wanted to make him angry, it worked. It took the referee, Diego, and 2 of his assistants to get him back into his corner. I was a bit ashamed to admit that I wanted to embarrass him, so I decided to put on a little show. Carlos was big, rough, and surprisingly quick. We moved around each other, and I kicked him several times on his right thigh. It would slow him down and make him less strong when he tried to take me down. I knew from past fights that he would move slowly for the next few days. I had chances to defeat him, and the crowd could see that. We both faced boos from the audience. After the second round, he slumped on his stool, struggling to breathe. I chose not to sit, wanting to show him up. I leaned on the ropes and acted bored. After that round, my corner coach understood my strategy and handed me a newspaper. I pretended to read it, paying no attention to my surroundings. This drove the crowd wild. As he became desperate, I let my guard down, and he managed to take me down in the third round. There was a tough struggle for a moment, but I managed to break free. I was later told it was like trying to hold on to a slippery fish. I moved in a way that surprised him. I began to regret showing off until he gave me a solid hit during a break. I had my protective gear on, so it wasn't a direct hit, but it still hurt. To his credit, the referee noticed and stopped the round, warning Carlos. I grabbed the microphone that the announcer had placed on the ropes. "Ladies and gentlemen, I respect my opponent. He has fought bravely, but it's time to end this. I'm willing to stop now. Let's call it a draw and forget about the money." Many in the crowd applauded my gesture, while others booed, hoping to see me lose. Carlos, however, refused angrily. I decided it was time to finish the fight. When the round restarted, I took my time, looking for my moment. He had learned from me and aimed kicks at my thigh. He connected once, leaving a bruise. He kicked again, and I grabbed his leg, pulling him off balance and making him fall. He tried to roll away, but I jumped on his back, pushing my knee into his side. The crowd gasped. I wrapped my arm around his neck and rolled him onto me, using my legs to hold him in place and applying pressure. He thrashed around, refusing to give up, but it took only about 45 seconds for him to lose consciousness. The referee tapped my shoulder. I let him go and stood up. The crowd went silent for a moment, then erupted in cheers as the referee raised my hand in victory. Everybody loves a winner. The arena had places for the matadors to clean up, so I took a shower before joining my family. Carlos could be difficult, but he was a strong fighter. I had some loose teeth, a split lip, bruises on my cheek and thigh, and a sore rib. My family was waiting for me. Angel and her mother had already left, but Graham said they would come by for lunch tomorrow. Gail was laughing. "Graham is definitely a fan now. Did you hear her? When that guy made a cheap move, I thought she might jump in the ring. I had to hold her down in her seat." Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez were just as excited, and we had a good time getting a quick bite to eat afterward. Gail noticed I was limping and went into nurse mode. "We need to put ice on that bruise when we get home, and you might need some help to relax." Later that evening, she helped me feel better. She checked on my injuries and made sure I was okay. "We need to make sure everything is working right," she said as she took charge. "Just relax and let me take care of you." That sounded like a good idea to me. She later said that we were just being careful and it was best to ensure everything was fine. I was pretty sore and tired from the day. I slept deeply for 10 hours. I missed breakfast, so I grabbed a banana and went out on the patio. Josh was there with Angel and a few friends, and they wanted to hear about the fight. I didn't brag about it, but I shared what happened. I tried to resolve things peacefully, but he wouldn't listen. Fighting should always be the last choice. It's much better to shake hands than to fight. Then I shared some exciting news. I had received an invitation to register our dojo with the Martial Arts Society in Mexico City. If I did this, we could compete in tournaments. I had already sent the forms in. Our first tournament is in a month. Everyone will have a chance, but only 4 will compete this time based on skills. Josh, Angel, Jose, and Carlotta will represent us. Now we need a name for our dojo. Talk to everyone and bring me some suggestions when we meet on Tuesday. The kids were all excited. I knew choosing a name would be a popular topic for the next couple of days. It was almost lunchtime when Angel and her mom arrived. At first, I thought she was Angel's older sister because she looked so young. Later, I learned she was 27, having married and had Angel when she was 15. This was quite common in rural areas at that time. She wore a long, colorful skirt and a white blouse, with her hair tied back in a bandana. Her hair almost reached her waist. She had deep, warm eyes that were almost chocolate in color. She was slender, with a nice shape. She was a single mom. Her husband had gone to Mexico City and then just vanished. Angel was just 3 years old the last time she saw him. I felt a spark when we touched. Her hands were strong and a bit rough, showing she worked hard. Everyone saw how shy I became around her. I lost my usual confidence. They stayed until dark, and I drove them home. Even in our quiet town, there was trouble sometimes. Her house was small but tidy and warm. It seemed like money was tight. When I got home, my grandma, Gail, Tia Rodriguez, and her sister were all smiling at me. "What's going on?" "Nothing, dear," said Grandma. "Rosalita is such a nice young woman, don't you think, ladies?" They all nodded, agreeing. "She's lovely, too. It's strange she isn't married. Maybe the right person just hasn't come along," said Tia, looking right at me. "Hold on. I just met her and don't know much about her. Stop trying to set me up." They all just laughed and went to bed, except for Gail. Gail and I had stopped being close a couple of months ago. She was now seeing a young doctor she worked with. She said it wasn't serious, but I could tell they were heading in that direction. She tried to tease me about it, and I joked that maybe we could have a double wedding. She got a little quiet. "He's wanting something more serious, but it's only been a few weeks. I told him that people don't rush things here. Still, he makes me really happy. And not just that, he has a lot of energy." I raised my hand. "Whoa, too much information. But I'm glad you're happy. You deserve it." Rosalita and Angel started joining us for Sunday lunches. They stayed until dark, and I would take them home. We would eat, talk with the family, and take walks, sometimes sitting in a quiet part of the patio. I shared my life story with her, and she shared hers with me. As the youngest of 13, her marriage was mostly arranged without her choice. He wasn't mean, just indifferent. After Angel was born, he all but forgot about them. They didn't really miss him when he went away. She got a divorce for his abandonment after 7 years. It took a month for me to finally take her on a real outing. If you could call it that, I took her, Angel, Grandma, and Josh to a wrestling match. After my match, they were hooked. Grandma had a favorite, a young wrestler who always gave flowers to the ladies, especially older ones. She had 2 that he had given her as keepsakes. His name was the Lover, and he wore a white mask with little red hearts. But in the ring, he was all business. He had real skills and was tough. Diego got us great seats. He was really trying to convince me to wrestle for him. I had become a bit famous, like a local legend, a Gringo Tlaloc, the Aztec god of storms and earthquakes. He had given me a special name. Rosalita liked it when he used that name for me. It fits you. You're like a storm that builds up slowly, meaning you don't get angry easily, but when you do, it's strong and sudden, like a storm or an earthquake, and it can leave a big impact. I hope you never get upset with me. I had never thought of myself that way. We were in Mexico City, and after the match, we enjoyed a nice dinner at one of the best places in town. It was Chinese food, something Rosalita and Angel had never tried before. They really liked it. I got the feeling they didn't go out much. That night, I got my first kiss. She sent Angel away, saying she wanted to talk to me. "Thank you for tonight. We both had a great time. It's been a long while since we had fun like this." What I thought was just a quick thank you kiss turned into something longer. Lips parted after a minute, and we got caught up in the moment. She pulled back quickly, breathing hard, said goodnight, and rushed into her house. It took me a while to calm down before I could leave. I lay awake for a long time that night, thinking. The next Saturday, she joined us for our first tournament. We filled 2 cars. In mine were me, Rosalita, and the kids, while Gail, Graham, and 2 sets of parents rode in the other. One of my proudest moments was when we introduced ourselves. Each dojo had a symbol and a flag. After a lot of talking, the kids chose Hands of Peace as our name. Our symbol was 3 hands together, 1 black, 1 brown, and 1 white. At first, we didn't get much respect, but we left with 6 trophies. 3 were for katas, or sets, and 3 for point fighting. Josh won 2, Angel won 2, and the others each won 1. I treated the whole group to ice cream afterward, and we had a bunch of happy, tired kids when we got home. I reminded them not to expect results like this every time. The local newspaper featured us, taking a picture of the whole group in their uniforms, proudly holding their trophies. Soon, I had people calling, wanting to join and ask about fees. I had to explain that it was just a hobby for the neighborhood kids. I promised to let them know if I decided to open a studio. Rosalita encouraged me to go for it. It could really help the community. We need that right now. She was right. By 1985, drugs were becoming a bigger problem. We were mostly left alone, but it was getting rough in Mexico City and other cities. Josh was growing taller and getting stronger. I was sure he would be over 6 feet. He was lifting weights, and at almost 12, he was doing schoolwork at a 9th grade level. I could see him heading to college soon. I made an agreement with Diego to help his wrestlers once a week, teaching them moves that would help them in their matches. The fighters started winning more, and even though they tried to keep it quiet, word got out and others wanted to hire me. I chose to stay with Diego because this was a fun hobby and he was my friend. 2 months later, with encouragement from Diego, Rosalita, and my whole family, I returned to the ring. It was for a charity event benefiting the medical clinic where Gail volunteered, and they needed the funds. I agreed to wrestle anyone who wanted to for $1,500, with the money going to the clinic. The local paper promoted it heavily, and a few sports sections in Mexico City mentioned it too. I lived in Delgado, and I became known as the Delgado Gringo. Local pride was important in our small towns. Tia made me a new mask, featuring American colors on one side and Mexican on the other, with a yellow star in the center. At first, no one challenged me, and I almost decided to just do an exhibition match to boost ticket sales. Then, the top wrestler from Mexico City, the Hawk, accepted my challenge to show those arrogant gringos. The response was overwhelming, and they had to move the event to a soccer field in Mexico City. I prepared carefully by watching recordings of his past matches. I discovered he had a strong background in martial arts. After some research, I learned he held a black belt in judo, but no one knew what level. I knew I would need to be cautious. He could easily defeat me if I wasn't careful. Plus, since I offered the money, I had a lot at stake. The crowd was nearly 7,000 strong. Large screens had been set up around the field for everyone to see. Every TV station in the area came to cover the event, along with several newspapers. One radio station planned to provide a live commentary. For the first time, I felt nervous. Rosalita and Gail helped keep me calm until it was time for the match. We were the main event. We entered before the Hawk as the challengers. The town band played El Dujulo, and my dojo team carried our flags: the Mexican flag, the American flag, the local province flag, and the city flag while the band played. I walked out behind the band with Gail on one arm and Rosalita on the other, followed by Diego and Josh, who were there to support me. It was an impressive entrance, and the crowd loved it. Just before I stepped into the ring, Rosalita gave me a serious kiss. "Go on, Tlaloc. Show them your strength." One of the TV stations captured the moment, and the crowd cheered loudly. The Hawk's entrance was simpler, and he looked upset. The match was intense. I realized from the first hit that he was aiming to win decisively rather than just score points. Neither of us seemed to have an edge. I wanted to take my time to tire him out. He weighed around 280 pounds, and despite his strong build, it was clear he enjoyed his lunches. So I kept moving, dodging and striking, trying to stay away from grappling since judo was a strong style in that area. I had a 5-inch reach advantage, which I aimed to use to my benefit. I nearly lost in the third round when he landed a powerful kick that sent me bouncing off the ropes and back into his reach. I was fortunate the round ended when it did. While Josh helped clear my mind, Diego was breaking down what had just happened. "He nearly got you. Watch his legs. He's getting tired, so he's going to try to finish the fight quickly before he makes a mistake. Use your reach and move to your left. He's not as strong on that side. Keep an eye on his legs." Diego was right. He was trying to push me into the ropes and grab me. I stayed near the center of the ring using jabs and kicks. With 30 seconds left, I caught him with a front kick right on the chin. He hit the ropes, expecting me to follow, but I didn't. When he bounced back, I quickly dropped and grabbed his ankle, taking him down. In a surprising turn, since I had avoided grappling all night, I rolled him up and locked his arm before he could recover. The match was over. He had to submit, or I could seriously hurt him. He was smart enough to realize it and tapped the mat, signaling his defeat. It was tough to get up, but I managed to rise. He laid there for a moment, and I extended my hand. After a few seconds, he took it, and I helped him up. After the announcement, we shook hands, and he raised my arm in victory. I gave him a quick hug and told him, "Never again." He smiled and replied, "You got that right," and we both limped out of the ring. My little town celebrated all night. They were proud of one of their own, a giant slayer. We were interviewed by newspapers, radio stations, and television. The fight was shown repeatedly before every lucha libre event for weeks, which felt a bit embarrassing. Suddenly, everyone was calling me Tlaloc, thanks to Rosalita on TV. That night, Rosalita decided to get closer. After the event, I drove her home. She would be alone since Angel was staying with Diego. His daughter was her age, and they had become good friends. We sat in my Jeep, chatting about the fight and life in general. Just when I thought the night was over, she asked, "Will you walk me in, please?" Her house was small and simple. I wasn't sure what she did for work, but it was clear there wasn't much extra money. Family photos decorated the walls with a special section just for Angel. There was a large picture of her in her uniform and a newspaper photo featuring her with her trophies. The trophies were on a shelf under the photos. I was surprised to see two of me, one with her on the patio of my house and another of me in my lucha libre mask. She brewed some strong coffee that I had come to love, and we sat together on her sofa. Slowly, we leaned into each other and kissed gently. She stood up and looked at me. "Come." We walked to her bedroom. She turned and kissed me warmly, then stepped back. She loosened her blouse and let it slide off her shoulders. Next, she let her skirt drop to the floor. She turned away from me. "Can you help me?" My hands trembled as I helped her. I admired her figure as she let go of more of her clothes. With her back to me, she removed the last of her clothing. She turned to face me, looking lovely and confident. Her skin glowed like rich caramel, and I felt a wave of admiration for her beauty. I stood there, amazed, until she smiled and playfully tugged at my t-shirt. Coming back to myself, I quickly removed my shirt. Since I was tired, we took our time. I was surprised by how close we felt to each other. She later shared that it had been 3 years since she had last been with someone. As we let our emotions flow, I forgot my worries. We found a rhythm, feeling fulfilled together and sharing a moment of joy. After a few moments, we cuddled, and she laughed softly. "Thank you, Tlaloc. I really felt something special." "You're welcome, my Chalchiuhtlicue. Thanks for letting me share this with you." I couldn't see her face in the dim light, but I sensed her smile before she hugged me tightly. Chalchiuhtlicue was the Aztec goddess of lakes and water, and a partner of Tlaloc. We shared gentle moments together again that night and the next morning. I had never seen her so happy as when she made us breakfast with rich coffee and fresh fruit. I drove her to pick up Angel for lunch. Angel sat in the back seat, smiling at us. The knowing glances and smiles from the ladies at lunch made me think about leaving, but Rosalita held my hand tightly. I had forgotten how wonderful being in love felt. Rosie and Angel spent a lot of time with us. Angel saw Josh more as a brother than a boyfriend, and they were almost always together. He was improving her English so much that she was even better than Rosie. We went out as a family each week, and Rosie and I shared a special night on Saturdays. Angel stayed at my house those evenings. I loved her, and she loved me back. I asked her to marry me, but she said no. I was so surprised that I couldn't say anything for a while. When I calmed down and she stopped crying, I asked her why. "I'm not the right person for you. You're important in this town. I know you have some money. You need someone of higher status, not a girl from a poor background who struggles with reading and writing. I'm old for having more children. I don't have much to offer." Every time I felt settled in that country, something would surprise me again. I took her face in my hands, making her look at me. "Rosie, please listen to me. I don't care about money or where you come from. I want you. I love you. You have more elegance in you than anyone else in town. And even if you can't have more kids, you've already given me a wonderful daughter. I wouldn't want more than that. Please say you'll be with me or my heart will break." She began to cry but managed to say yes. I had already bought a ring and had it ready. At lunch the next day, she didn't say anything but held out her hand. I received kisses from the women and handshakes from the men. She was Catholic, and we had our wedding in the local chapel after a 6-month engagement. Many of her family came to celebrate. Josh had never seen so many kids his age, and he was excited to have new cousins. The wedding went smoothly, and I heard the celebration lasted 2 days. We were not there, as we were off on our honeymoon. We spent 2 weeks in Cancun before coming back to pick up Josh and Angel. The situation with newcomers hadn't begun yet, and my family found her interesting and lovely. Her natural beauty put them at ease pretty quickly. Mom grew fond of her and pulled me aside, smiling. "What's your deal with white girls, honey? You really upgraded with this one. She has class and she's probably too good for you." It was summer break for the kids, and when we returned to Mexico, Josh and Angel stayed behind. Mom practically begged Rosie to let them stay. "I'm getting older, and I've never had much time with Josh. I'd like to know my new granddaughter better, just for a week or two. It would be good for Angel and help her get ready for when you come back." We had talked about this before we married. I had been the plant manager for almost 2 years and had committed to 5. After that, we planned to hand management over to local people. My old plant manager was planning to retire in 2 years, and I was told that I would get her job. I thought she would be more reserved about it, but she surprised me. "I can't wait to start our new life together. My family doesn't live close. I moved here with my first husband. I have some good friends, but none are as important as my new family. It will be much better for Angel. If we stay here, she will have limited opportunities." She was right, and what she wasn't saying was that she wanted to leave the area. Drugs were becoming a serious problem, with drug groups expanding their reach and often clashing with each other. These conflicts affected many people in the community. They were taking control of local governments and corrupting the police with money and drugs. I had about 6 months left before we were moving back to the States when the local mayor came to see me. We always tried to keep a good relationship with the local government, so when he showed up unexpectedly, I didn't think much of it. He was newly elected and I hadn't met him before. The conversation took me by surprise. After some small talk, he got straight to the point. "My team has looked at the community needs, and we unfortunately have to increase your taxes and fees by 25%. I felt worried. Part of our agreement for coming to this area was a promise about these issues. I didn't understand why he wanted to break that promise. "Sir, you have the upper hand. Does the city council support this?" He waved his hand dismissively. "There's no need to trouble them with these small details. You will pay the tax monthly directly to me. I will decide how to use it." I held his gaze until he looked down. "I'll need to think about this and discuss it with my superiors. It will take a few days to get back to you. The first of the month is in 3 days. I expect to collect the tax then, no matter what your people say. You'll have no choice if you want to keep operating. It would be unfortunate if the workers went on strike, or if the electrical service was out for a few days while repairs were done. The tax isn't worth the hassle of fighting it." He had a smirk on his face. I stood up. "Leave. Right now." He got up slowly. "Think about it carefully. It would be a shame if the clinic had to close, or if the road to your house was blocked for repairs for a long time. And take care of your lovely family. These are difficult times." Before he realized it, I had him pressed against my office wall with my arm near his throat. I looked him straight in the eyes. "Listen closely, Mayor. If anything happens to my wife or family, I will hold you responsible. As you said, these are tough times. It would be unfortunate to get the federal authorities involved in such a minor issue, don't you agree?" I could see fear in his eyes. He understood that attention from the federal government could cause trouble for him. He tried to stay calm. "Let me talk to my advisors. Maybe we can lower the tax a little. Listen carefully. Our company will not pay any money you try to pressure us for. If you keep pushing, we might just close and move somewhere else. Honestly, orders are slowing down, so it wouldn't take much. Think about it. And Alcalde, don't mention my family again. Do you get that?" He hurried out of the office and I followed him to his car. His driver was Carlos. No surprise there. "You should be careful about who you associate with, Alcalde." I looked right at Carlos when I said it. His expression darkened and he moved toward me. "Stop," said the Alcalde. "This is not the right moment." He reluctantly got into the car and drove away. I returned to the office to think things over. Most of my team had already left. Only Gail, 2 maintenance workers, and I were there. It was time to send them home. I called the assistant manager into my office and told him I needed a personal day tomorrow. He was someone I trusted, so I shared what had just happened. "This is not good, Berto. There are rumors that his campaign was funded by Don Vittorio. What should we do?" I'll investigate tomorrow and start taking steps to protect ourselves. He smiled for the first time in our talk. Oh, are you going to call on Tlaloc to settle scores with his enemies? I just grinned. In a way. I discussed the whole situation with my family. Rosie and the others were worried, except for Gail. Forget them. I won't hide. I don't want you to hide. I just need you to be careful and more aware of your surroundings, please? She agreed, and I headed to the gym to speak with Diego. He listened to my concerns, thinking it through. I hear you might start farming. You'll need help. He turned to his wrestlers and picked 3 of them. Juan Tomas Felipe, this is your new boss. Do well for him. I'm sure he'll pay you fairly. Then he turned back to me. They start tomorrow. I'll need some funds to make sure they have the right tools. You can trust them. I gave Diego a check, marking it as training fees. He knew not to cash it locally. I wondered what tools we would need. The next day I went into Mexico City and visited a few suppliers, just in case anyone was watching. Then I found a public payphone and made a collect call. The vice president of our company was surprised to hear from me. He was the head of international business, and we knew each other a little. What's going on, Bobby? Are the phone lines down at the plant? As clearly as I could, I explained the situation. He was sharp and let me finish. We had locations in some unstable areas, and he had a lot of experience. At the end, I asked him what his thoughts were. Nothing. We have 2 days. I will make a few calls to get things moving. Be careful, Bobby. I've dealt with this before. If we run out of time, it might be best to pay the extortion. It could buy us some time. Someone will be here soon. Oh, you should get your family out, too. These people know how to get results. One of the quickest ways is to go after families. Rosie was upset at first, but eventually agreed. I surprised her by getting visas for the Rodriguez family. They had been like family to us for years, and I didn't want them in danger. I was glad when they jumped at the chance. They had a daughter in America who always invited them to visit. They left first, saying their daughter had sent them tickets. It was a common story, so no one thought twice about it. Rosie, Gail, and her husband said they were going to a rural area further south to scout for another clinic. Gail was 5 months pregnant, and her husband didn't want to leave her in danger. Instead of heading south, they went north to Mexico City. They were on a plane in 90 minutes. Now I was alone, just me and the 3 wrestlers. A new vendor came by and wanted to talk. My name is Vincente Doran. I'm a major in the federal police. I hear you have a problem? I told him what happened. We had made the first payment to buy some time. The next payment was due in 10 days. What do you want me to do? Give them the money, but do it here. We'll wire it, and we'll record the entire meeting. Then we can trace the money and find the leader. Once we have enough information, we can make arrests. It took 2 more months, but they got what they needed. The leader was caught, and raids happened over 3 months. I boarded a plane an hour before the raids started. I never went back. When I landed, my extended family welcomed me excitedly at the airport. Rosie looked different. Maybe the American food agreed with her. I mentioned it to her. She smiled and placed my hand on her stomach. Something American agreed with me. You're going to be a father again in 5 months. Sometimes things work out well. After our joyful reunion that night, she told me how happy she was that we were safe, and no one got hurt. I was so scared you would get involved. I smiled slightly in the dark. Tia Rodriguez's sister, the widow, chose not to leave. 2 nights before my departure, she was badly injured. I rushed to the hospital when I heard. In addition to her injuries, she had 2 deep cuts. I spoke to her just before the medication took effect. She had a broken jaw, arm, hand, 3 broken fingers, and some ribs. She needed 68 stitches on different parts of her body. She was 69 years old. Tell me, Maria, who did this? I whispered in her ear, making sure no one else could hear. She held my hand tightly. Carlos, she whispered back. He has a weapon. He asked what you would do about it. I hugged her tightly as she fell asleep. Then I made arrangements to pay her hospital bills. I stopped by the gym. Send a message to Carlos. Tell him tomorrow afternoon at Rosalita's house and remind him to bring his weapon. Diego tried to change my mind, but he eventually stopped trying. Tell him to come, Diego. Make sure he knows I have a family, too. He needs to be there. It was quiet in our old home, with all the furniture gone, waiting for new people to move in. I held Rosie's weapon. It was well balanced, worn but effective, and very sharp. I remembered watching her easily cut through sugarcane with it. I checked the edge. It was still very sharp. She had laughed when I said I was impressed. I'm on my own. Sometimes I have to discourage someone who gets too close. It cuts more than just sugarcane if I need it to. It reminded me of a short sword I had used before. I practiced with it for hours the night before and that morning until I felt ready. He came, but not alone. He had 4 men with him, one of whom was his son. I stood at the door and smirked at him. Afraid to come alone? He smiled back at me. No, I wanted witnesses. If I lose, they will make sure you don't escape. I don't think so, said a voice from the trees. Diego and 3 of his friends appeared, all holding guns and wearing simple masks. Whoever wins walks away. Then it will be over. Deal? The men nodded. Carlos looked uneasy, which made me smile wider. Let's see how you do against a man instead of an older woman, or you could kneel and beg for your life. Do it, and I might let you go. I stepped out of the door, holding the weapon loosely by my side. Knowing he had no choice, he charged at me, swinging his weapon. I easily blocked his attack and lightly smacked him as he passed by. It made a loud noise, and I knew it must have hurt. I heard someone laugh. Everyone knew I could have defeated him then. He became more careful, but he didn't have my skills. Soon he was bleeding from 2 deep cuts on his sides. How does it feel, Carlos? It hurts just like what you did to Maria, doesn't it? Will you stand there upset, or do you want more? He was determined. Soon he had more cuts, including one on his cheek. That's going to leave a mark. He managed to hit me twice, and I had a few stitches on my neck and arm from it. I grew tired of the competition and forced him to his knees with my weapon at his throat. I'm done. Give me your word that you will leave, and I'll let you live. Keep this up, and it will only end badly for you. Make your choice, I said. I could tell he wanted to say more, but he lowered his head. Can I take my family? He asked. Take anyone you want, I replied. Just be gone by tomorrow. I turned to leave, keeping an eye on his men. I noticed his son's eyes widen, and suddenly I jumped to the side. Carlos had pulled out a gun. I wasn't sure why he didn't just shoot. I reacted quickly as I saw the machete move. His gun fell to the ground, still in his hand. Blood was pouring from his arm. Get a tourniquet! I shouted. His son quickly removed his shirt and belt. We wrapped it around the arm and tightened it to stop the bleeding. Just before they put Carlos in the car, I leaned in close and looked him in the eye. This ends now. If you do anything else, I'll have to make this worse for you and your family. Do you understand? He nodded faintly. I glanced at his son. Make sure you both understand. I'm serious. I've had enough of this. Through Diego, I learned that Carlos told the hospital it was a farming accident. Injuries like this were becoming too common, and the staff had stopped asking questions. They tried to reattach the arm, but it didn't work. Diego sent me the machete, and now it hangs with my other martial arts tools. My mom lived long enough to see 2 more grandchildren, a boy and a girl, both with dark hair and light skin. Our relationship healed, and she adored Connie, her newest granddaughter, so much that she spent nearly every day with her. I got the job as plant manager as I had hoped. Rosie excelled in school, earning her high school diploma and an associate degree in 4 years. Now she's working toward her bachelor's and wants to be a Spanish teacher. I rejoined my old dojo and bought a half interest in it. Josh and Angel became part-time instructors. 2 old classmates of theirs moved to our town and started training. I had written them a long letter saying goodbye, but promised to help them however I could. They were the only ones who took me up on it. I finally made it to New York for a test and surprised everyone by jumping 2 ranks at once, which is rare. Josh shared film highlights of my Lucha Libre career with them. They laughed until I took down one of the instructors and won the match. It was a small town, so I knew this had to happen at some point. I was getting my new daughter out of her car seat. She was nearly 18 months old, babbling in a mix of English and Spanish. Rosie stood nearby, 5 months along with her brother. When we turned around, we nearly bumped into her. She had gained quite a bit of weight, probably over 250 pounds now. At 36, she looked much older. Tears shone in her eyes. "Hello, Bobby, how are you?" she asked. "I'm fine, Chandra, how are you?" I replied. She sighed. "Oh, I'll manage, it's good to see you." I felt Rosie grip my arm tightly. She knew who Chandra was. Grandma had shown her pictures. "Where are my manners? Chandra, this is my wife, Rosalita Margarita Consuelo Gomez Turner. Honey, This is Chandra Riley, my ex-wife. She shook Chandra's hand politely and smiled. It's nice to meet someone from his past. I'm sure you have some good memories just like I do now. Come on, honey. If you want to talk, I'll take Constance Julieta. It's too hot out here for her. Chandra's eyes grew wide. We had named our daughter after my grandmother and my mother, just as we had hoped to do one day. No, it's okay. You're already carrying enough right now. Chandra, you should visit Graham more often. She asks about you, and her health isn't improving. It was nice to see you. I noticed tears in Chandra's eyes as we turned away. I felt a bit sad for her, but then I looked into the warm, chocolate eyes of my wife. Hey, everyone! Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.